Chapter 1. July. Happy birthday, baby. A woman with long green hair kissed her son on the cheek as he went to blow out his candles on his all-night cake. All day, she had to keep her nosy son out of the kitchen because he wanted to see. She told him it would ruin the surprise, and she almost locked him in his room with his computer on to keep him occupied. It brought such joy to her when she finally brought it out for him to see. Such pure awe engulfed his eyes with adoration for his mother and his favorite hero. Colored with red, blue, yellow, and white, she tried her best to make it look like a costume she'd seen All Might wear in her son's room. His green eyes grew big, and she thought he was about to cry of sheer joy. The boy grinned as he attempted to blow out the 10 candles as he jittered with excitement, finally seeing and eating the cake his mom worked so hard all day before their guest arrived. Granted, the guests were his mom's friends and their son, but it was still so nice of them to come even though said son didn't look happy. He remembered going up to Kakin at school inviting him, but the boy simply burned his invite before stalking off, laughing that no one was going to show up and he should learn that. Izuku's eyes flashed in surprise seeing he missed one. Oh. He quickly took another breath to blow it out real quick. Hopefully no one noticed, and he'd get to keep his birthday wish. If he wished with all his might, it might actually come true. His mom said so. Stupid Deku can't even blow out his candles on the first try. A voice grumbled. Only 2 people heard the voice, being Izuku and the boy's mother, who proceeded to smack her son across the back of the head. The boy growled at his mother, but kept his mouth shut, having promised he'd behave while at Inko's house. He might disrespect his hag, but never her. Hush, she growled before a smile turned as she enveloped the boy in a tight hug. Happy birthday, you little runt. Andy, too tight. Izuku squeaked, trying to squirm his way out of her grasp. Don't care, pipsqueak. My brat doesn't let me hug him anymore, so I have to get them where I can. Mitsuki said as she nuzzled his cheek. Mitsuki, please. We still need to cut the cake, then we can do presents. Mizuru said to his wife and placed a hand on her shoulder. All right, she grumbled, releasing the poor boy. Cake and presents were the best. The cake was so good as it was light and fluffy. Plus the icing was sweet that almost melted in your mouth. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, and Izuku believed even Kakin seemed to like it too. For gifts, Mom got him new notebooks, cool All Might pens, and a couple shirts. He couldn't wait to crack them open and write down the next analysis for the future. Writing about heroes and their quirks was the best part of his day. However, what always stumped him was he could never fully figure out how any of their quirks worked. If he could get better at that part, then helping take down villains and generally being a hero would be so easy. The Bakugas got him a new All Might figure that recently came out that Mom said that they'd see about getting later. Izuku couldn't help notice the sad look in her eyes when he opened it. It almost looked like she was crying. Quickly thanking his aunt and uncle for the gift, he quickly turned to his mom with a bright smile. Thank you so much, Mom. It's been the best birthday ever. I can't wait to write in these. Izuku said, flashing a 1,000,000-watt smile. Inko took in her son's smile and words and burst into tears as she hugged her son, thanking him for his kind words. She would never tell him, but that meant the world to her. She had been so worried the past week that she wouldn't be able to give her dear son what he wanted, a good birthday. After no one came last year, she was concerned that this year was going to be the same until she ran into Mitsuki at the store and offhandedly mentioned Izuku invited people, but no one confirmed they were coming. Mitsuki said Katsuki hadn't said anything and simply insisted to her friend that she and her family would come by to help celebrate. Inko already told her that just them being there meant the world to her, and probably to Izuku too. He'd be so happy to see people come. Inko wasn't a blind woman as her son probably thought she was. She knew Izuku didn't have any friends and the other kids at school bullied him. Sadly, it was just what followed being quirkless. She couldn't give her baby the life she wanted because the world was too cruel. They beat, bruised, and bloodied people like her baby, and she only hoped she could give him sparks of light during those dark times. It was the dark times that she felt most powerless during. The problem was that she knew she couldn't confront him about it because he was such a gentle soul. He would deny everything, and that would get them nowhere. So, she'd watch and be patient until he came to her unless it got to a point where her baby was in serious harm. Why don't you two brats go play while the adults clean up? Mitsuki said. Okay, Izuku exclaimed as he ran off toward his room with his presents. Izuku, put away your clothes. Don't just throw them in a closet. Inko yelled after him. Don't want to. Katsuki grumbled. Katsuki, I don't give a damn. Go. Mitsuki said, glaring down at her son who was giving it to her right back before he conceded and angrily stomped off to follow the birthday boy. Katsuki was appalled at being told that they were going to Deku's house for his birthday. Apparently the hag met with that nerd's mom and they just had to talk about it. He didn't last year, or the years before that, so why did he have to go now? When his mom questioned him about the invite, he told he didn't want to go and forgot. She said he was being a bad friend. Katsuki reminded her he was not Deku's friend. He got smacked for that one, and his dad did not come to his rescue on that one. Stupid Deku had his hag and his old man wrapped around his bony weak finger. Not only that, that stupid Deku was getting the action figure he wanted and pestered his mom weeks ago when they first announced the release. Granted, he'd never tell the hag that, but she had to have known he wanted it too. As many times he mentioned that it was cool, she had to have a hint. Just like the useless Deku he was, he had to ruin everything just because he was born. Izuku quickly put away his new clothes like his mom asked and set the All Might figure out on his desk where he could see it every day. Seeing the greatest hero first thing when he woke up every day would spur him forward in his dreams of being a hero just like him. A smile to remind him what it's supposed to look like. He added the notebooks to the bookshelf next to the one he was currently working on. Hearing heavy footsteps, he grabbed the most recent one and turned to the other boy who reluctantly entered his room and flung himself in his computer chair without care that it might break under the intensity. Izuku was so excited. After talking with Auntie and Uncle, he thinks he finally figured it out. How Kaken's quirk works. The other boy refused to tell anyone anything about it because, in his words, he didn't need any extra getting the upper hand on him. While Izuku said he'd never, Katsuki refused to believe him. Isn't it cool, Kaken? I think I figured out how your quirk works. Because of your mom and dad's quirks, you sweat out nitroglycerin from your palms and make it explode. And I bet if you were to store it could make even bigger explosions or even something close to a chain reaction. There are so many uses. Will you shut it? Katsuki yelled and Izuku squeaked silent. I didn't want to come, but my old hag forced me to. If I'm gonna suffer being here, at least don't make it fucking weird. One more word out of you, and I'll show you how my quirk works. Sorry. What did I say? Katsuki yelled as his hands sparked in Izuku's face. Izuku flinched back at the heat and put his hands up in response to protect himself. Anything to make sure the blast wouldn't hit his face. He couldn't get burns on his face because Mom would worry, and he could never let that happen. He could hide those on his hands or arms easily. However, instead of feeling the intense heat of his explosions, Izuku felt the familiar heat erupt from his own palms as a small explosion met Katsuki's, effectively blocking it. What the fuck? Katsuki yelled as the initial shock seeing Deku essentially use his quirk wear off. Katsuki language and stop messing around. You know better than to use your quirk in any house. Mitsuki yelled from the living room. What the fuck, Deku? Katsuki growled. You just stole my quirk, you shitty nerd. No, I didn't, I swear. Izuku panicked. He didn't have a quirk. There was no way he could have taken Kaken's. From how the blonde's hands were still sparking in anger, it was clear that the boy still had his quirk. It might have just been yours. That came from you, dipshit. Katsuki screamed. Before either boy could carry on arguing about what just happened, they were glass shatter from the kitchen that echoed through the small apartment. What the fuck are you doing here? Mitsuki's voice carried. Both boys got quiet as they tried to listen to what could have caused Mitsuki's outburst. As far as Izuku knew, no one else was to be coming by today. Quiet voices were heard, but they couldn't make out anything they said. No, Inko's voice screamed. Moments later, screams were heard and both boys were thrown into full-blown panic, forgetting about what just happened, and raced out of Izuku's room toward the living room. What they both saw would be forever etched into their minds, permanently remembered and scared. A tall man with white hair and a black suit stood there with hands stretched out. His fingers were coated black with red prominent cracks that extended into tendrils branching out in a frenzied mess. The entire living room was in tatters with holes in the walls and broken furniture. What stood out the most unseen was a broken picture frame of Izuku and Inko playing together happily. Izuku gasped sharply, and the breath was lost as his eyes widened, seeing some of the tendrils were impaled into his mother's chest. There was also one through her leg, another through her shoulder that held her up suspended in the air. However, the most prominent one was running straight through where her heart was. Her eyes wavered as they were slowly losing their life they once had moments ago. She looked over and saw Izuku. "Baby, run," Inko said before coughing blood. The tendrils then pulled away with a disgusting slosh as her body then hit the floor with a resounding thud and proceeded to rapidly bleed out. A pool was instantly made. "Mommy!" Izuku screamed as tears erupted from his eyes uncontrollably. And no. She was going to be fine. He could go find help and they'd take her to the hospital. Doctors would patch her up and be good as new. The blood pool only grew by the second, and his mother wasn't moving. "You bastard!" Katsuki yelled as he charged the man with his hands popping. How dare whoever this bastard was come in and do that to Deku's mom? She might have been Deku's mom, but she was nice and even gave him chili pepper for his cake to make it a little spicier. If Deku wasn't going to do anything about this man killing his mom, then he would. He was going to be a hero, damn it. He would take this villain out and save the day. "Insignificant," the man said as he backhanded Katsuki, hurtling the boy back toward his parents. Katsuki harshly hit the floor with a familiar thud Izuku only heard moments ago. Still in a trance, Izuku flinched, and tears also came out harder. "Mom! Kaken!" "Katsuki!" Mitsuki screamed as she then ran to his side, cradling him as she checked him over to make sure he wasn't badly hurt. At the sound of her yelling, Izuku snapped out of his stupor before attempting to run toward his mother, only to be stopped by a large figure standing in front of him. The red-eyed man only grinned as Izuku looked up at him with fear. As Izuku attempted to back away, the man reached out and harshly gripped his shoulder. Izuku winced and attempted to pull away, but found he wasn't strong enough as the man's fingers pressed into his shoulder. Izuku didn't want to think the kids at the playground hurt him worse than this. "Izuku, fucking run!" the blonde woman yelled as tears still streamed down her face as she held onto her son, who was luckily only dazed and a little bruised. Now, running isn't what a hero would do, is it?" the tall man with white hair said patronizingly as he moved his hand up to twist into Izuku's curls. Izuku didn't answer as he shook and could barely look past the man to see his mom or the other family. Mom still wasn't moving and her skin had gone pale white. The blood on the floor now pooled everywhere and completely flooded and dyed the carpet. Looking at his auntie and uncle, their eyes pleaded with him to do anything, not to stand there like a useless and defenseless boy. "Answer me, Izuku," the voice commanded, and Izuku jumped at the boom. "And no." "Good. We'll fix that stutter later. Now, come along with me. A hero knows what must be done to save people, right? Self-sacrifice is the most noble act a hero can make. Can you do that, Izuku? Can you sacrifice yourself to save these people?" The boy trembled as his mind raced with thoughts, questions, and pleas. He pleaded that All Might would come bursting in through the window and save them with a reassuring smile. A bright light that let him know everything would be all right. At this point, any hero would do so they could save them. But it seemed like no hero was going to be here to save. Clenching his shaking hands, he looked up at the man with tears running down his determined face. If I come with you, you won't hurt them." The man smiled as he chuckled and ruffled his curls. Similar to ones he had as a boy, but kept them short and tame. Just how everything should be. "Of course not. I am a man of my word." "Izuku, no. If a hero wasn't going to save them, then he was going to have to be one. He wanted to be a hero just like All Might. He knew he couldn't fight this man. He even took out Kaken. Despite being a villain, he had a point. If he went with them, if he saved them, then they could get help from Mom and come and get him. They could tell the heroes and they'd save him. Plus, they needed to make sure Kaken was all right. Izuku was then pulled from his thoughts as a rough hand grabbed his arm and pulled him. As the man dragged him away toward the window, screams erupted and echoed throughout the building. As he got closer to the window, Izuku looked out and saw someone he knew that lived on the first floor run out, being chased by something. Whatever it was had an exposed brain and viciously grabbed the man before crushing him in its grip. The monster roared before it fell over. It was almost like it died. What? TCH. I'll have to inform the doctor that his creations still need some work after all. You promised. Izuku yelled as he tried to fight his way out of his grip. The man smirked before snorting down at the naive child. Oh dear child. I said I wouldn't hurt them. That didn't include anyone else in the building. They still might be collateral though. Only time will tell. Not that you'll find out. Izuku's eyes widened. He wasn't a hero after all. He was hand and massacre. Blood was soaking his hands as screams echoed in his ears. As he looked back, green eyes met dazed awakened red that showed a hint of fear, guilt, and determination. At least he tried to be a hero, but apparently Kakin was right. He was useless, and it only got people hurt. The least he could do is give them a smile to let them know at least they'd be all right. They had to be. April, 5 years later, after the first day of UA. A black shaggy-haired, scruffy man rubbed his eyes as he entered his quiet apartment at close to 2 in the morning. Patrol had been surprisingly quiet and he wished he could just crawl into his bed until the alarm would go off in a couple hours. However, school files don't read themselves. Even if school just started, he had to make headway on them before expelling any more kids. 2 of them were already out of his hair and didn't feel the slightest sorry. One was just a pervert who just wanted to score with girls, and another who barely even tried, just wanting fame and glory, thinking he'd skate by with his powerful quirk. Yeah, see how those kids like general studies. Already he submitted a transfer notice to switch one of the general studies kids to the hero course. The kid showed promise at the entrance exam, but didn't score high thanks to his quirk not working well against robots. Something he strongly related to and was often vocal about to the board and principal. The last seat was up for debate, and he'd see if the bigot could earn his place back or he'd give it to another more deserving student that came along. The pervert wasn't going anywhere. The pro refused to budge on that decision. Even without looking at the files, he could tell some students were going to be more interesting than others, or as he liked to refer to them as problems. Some were going to be straight-laced while others looked like they were going to need a little extra help academically. Not a problem, but they certainly wouldn't skate by. However, one stood out more than the others. He did extremely well in the quirk apprehensive test, but as soon as anyone tried to talk to him, he snapped to leave him alone. He wasn't here to make friends, and nothing was going to get in the way of his goal. A blonde-haired kid with an explosion quirk who seemed to have this haunting look in his eyes all day. He couldn't place where he had seen this kid before. Might as well start with him and see if he could find out what had been nagging at him. Name, Bakugo Katsuki. Quirk, explosion. There was a note. Has been noted to harass the local police stations into looking into the Mizudafa massacre. Aizawa sighed. Of course, that's where he recognized him. He remembered being at the station once and watching a pro escort the kid out who was literally swearing up and down that no one was doing anything to find him. He was lucky they didn't charge him for improper quirk usage, but he could see that some of the morons there wouldn't. Sighing, he got up from his chair and walked into his office that was also the guest room. It wasn't much, just a simple futon for when Hisashi or Namuri needed a place to crash after a rough patrol or spent the night out karaokeing and drinking. Underneath the small desk was a lockbox. He kept his more sensitive cases there under lock and key. After that night, he pulled the file, although he had only glanced at it, and he wished he hadn't before. He needed to know what could have gotten this child so worked up to harass the police. That kind of shit could stay on one's record and hurt his future. Pulling out the files, he sighed again, feeling the impending headache. When asked, the officers just said it was a cold case and nothing much mattered about it. All those people were dead, and so was the supposedly missing kid. Aizawa had to stop himself from punching them. Bakugo Katsuki, along with his parents, were one of the few survivors from that night, and the he that he was referring to was Izuku Midoriya, a child who had supposedly been kidnapped. Supposed being a keyword, as no one reported the child as missing beside the Bakugo family, and his mother was dead. He was just gone, and no one bothered to care because he was registered as quirkless. Nothing at the scene suggested kidnapping, as all but 3 people were killed who didn't even live there. The place was condemned to be torn down, as all anyone could think about when looking at the place was the corpses of people who had been slaughtered by God knows what. Teeth marks, tears off body parts. It was horrifying to even look at the photos. Aizawa couldn't imagine being there. God, He hoped this kid was in therapy. He really didn't want to open that bag of cats yet. Well, this sounded like tomorrow's problem. Might as well try to take a nap. An almost 16-year-old boy with red eyes looked at the almost 6-year-old figure sitting on his desk. After that night, he had to go back for it. Granted, he had to sneak in as the complex was closed off, but he didn't get caught. Plus, if he did, he could always pull some therapeutic shit or a sob story. People ate that shit up. He grabbed all he could from Deku's room, including some of his merch, a picture of him and Inko, the figure on the desk, and the notebooks. He grabbed all 10 of them, shoving them in his duffel, at first rather roughly, before realizing the mistake. He wasn't stealing. He was keeping them safe until he could return them to their rightful owner. Deku would want him to hold on to this until he got back. After he was safe, he'd let that nerd ramble on as much as he wanted and finally see what that night was all about. How did Deku use his quirk, and what did that man want with him? Katsuki needed to know, and no one was giving him any fucking answer because he was child and no one cared about what happened to the kid who was still out there waiting for a hero. A hero that Katsuki promised himself to be as he laid on the cold floor in his mother's arms as he watched his Annie lose her life and that man drag Izuku away. As he watched that shitty nerd bastard, maybe even his friend who had the audacity to smile at them before being taken away. Don't worry, Izuku. If no one will believe me, then I'm going to find you myself. I got into UA like I said I would. I can finally do shit about it, and no one will get in my way. Chapter 2. Aizawa strolled into class the next morning, holding the strongest coffee in the biggest cup he could find. He hardly got any sleep as the case files kept him up all night. Yes, he looked at the student files, too, but as of that moment, the 19 students currently had enough potential to survive another day or more. He mainly focused on Bakugu's and decided that tomorrow's problem would become today's. From his minor observations yesterday, the boy had something to work through, and it needed to be addressed. He overheard the comments about his unsavory comments from his class after the day was done, and not to mention the threats he said during the test. Kicking a student's ass or tearing them a new one wasn't quite expected for a supposed stellar student. Aizawa wasn't looking forward to the day. Regarding the pieces about the case he put together the previous night, it was clear whoever attacked the complex that night had to be an upper-class villain and was smart enough not to gloat about it. Any lower level just trying to make a name for themselves would have boasted about it. A couple of villains did, but were quickly discredited for being responsible. None of those jokes who came forward had any kind of power or connections to cause such devastation. Still, just who had that kind of power? Also, was there a chance that Izuku Midoriya was still alive? Just like Bakugu, he wrapped his thoughts around the possibility, and he was surprised the kid didn't have eye bags to match his by now. Logically, every hero knows that kidnapped kids only have chances. Good morning, sir, Ida said. Good morning, Mr. Aizawa, Yayarosa said. Aizawa nodded at the two students who arrived way too early before classes. He didn't even want to be there right now, but logically, there wasn't any point in worrying about it then. He was lucky after homeroom he had some time to kill before classes, which was normally time dedicated to taking a nap, but now there were more pressing matters. Soon after, the rest of the class filed in, including their newest addition. The boy had been shocked to find out he was being moved up, and thankfully, the principal had a soft spot for the underdogs, which also allowed Aizawa the leeway to run his class how he wanted to. I'll cut right to it. As you can see, I wasn't joking. 2 students have been expelled from your class. In return, I've transferred a general studies student to join us. He's in the same situation you're in. Make the wrong moves, and all you will be expelled. Shinso, please take the seat in front of Yayarozu, seat 19. Today will be your first heroics lesson with your new teacher. I won't be there, but I'll be reviewing everything afterward to give my feedback during our next class. Just do what he says and don't cause any problems, got it? Just because you survived the first day doesn't mean the next won't be your last. Yes, sir. Everyone chorused except Bakugu, who only rolled his eyes. Bakugu, a word after classes today, Aizawa said as he went to leave. He'd leave these hooligans to themselves and figure out whatever they needed. In a couple minutes, they'd be mixed problems. Yeah, whatever. Barely the second day of school, and you're already in trouble? A boy with yellow hair and a black mark named Kaminari teased. Shut it, loser. I didn't do shit. Bakugo retaliated. Bakugo's eyes then narrowed in on his teacher. What could that tired hobo want from him this early? It's too early in the semester to have anything worth noting. Like he said, he didn't do shit. Unless… Yeah, right. Kaminari waved him off before turning to their newest student. So you're Shinso, right? The new boy with purple hair didn't say a word as he kept looking down at his book. Come man, lighten up. We already have one broody guy. We don't need two. What did you say? Bakugo growled as he popped his hands. I might be. What's it to you? The purple-haired boy responded. Well, we're not all jerks like Bakugo here. We just want to get to know you, dude, alongside everyone else. You must be pretty impressive to move up. I bet you're a total lady killer with that brooding, quiet guy act. I don't try to be. Shinso answered as he simply shrugged. So what's your quirk? Zero asked. Probably isn't as flashy as moi. Aoyama called out as everyone started to gather around the area to be included in the conversation. None of your concern. Shinso answered with a straight face and tone. Come on, man, we all know each other's. Kirishima answered. You totally missed out on the test yesterday. I say he's lucky. Mina groaned as she flopped down across a desk. That was so nerve-wracking. My quirk is only effective if you don't know it. So excuse me for being secretive. Shinso said. You'll get to see soon enough. Kaminari flashed a 100-watt smile and gave him a thumbs up. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. No problem, dude. I bet you'll kill it. Hey, what's up, kiddos? It's time for English. Present Mike said as he entered the room, cutting off the talk. Each of them quieted down before straightening up in their seats. None of them wanted to take a chance that any of the teachers here could be like Mr. Aizawa. Either that or they could tell their homeroom teacher they were goofing off and could kiss their seat goodbye. Grammar rules. Or maybe not. This really sucks. I am here, coming through the door like a hero. All Might announced as he came in for their afternoon class. This is essentially Hero ING 101. We'll teach you what it takes to be a pro and fight in the name of justice. But the first step is to look good. Here are your costumes designed for you based on your registration you sent in before school. Fucking finally. Can't wait to roast you all. Bakugo said as he grabbed his case and started heading toward the locker rooms. Hold it right there, a stern voice called. Bakugo rolled his eyes and kept walking. What is it that you even want out of this? You threaten your classmates, me included, and have no qualms about being disrespectful. Attending UA is a privilege many strive for, but few achieve. Are you sure you're in the right place? Why even become a hero if you have no desire to work alongside others? Bakugo stopped walking, but didn't turn around. Those watching closely could see anger shake through his shoulders. Of course he knew attending UA was a privilege. He needed the best hero school if he was going to become the best hero. Every time he turned around and saw that empty desk, he couldn't help thinking about how it was open for someone else. Open for someone who should be here. Let me tell you something, for eyes. He growled at Ida. You're all just extras to me that I have to beat in order to get where I want. What I want doesn't concern any of you, so stay out of my way if you know what's good for you. That's inappropriate and unheroic to see your comrades like that. Ida rebutted. Bakugo then whipped around with a fierce glare that shook with anger. His red eyes burned with an unwavering determination and, dare someone say, slight fear. Who the fuck cares? You senseless morons have never seen a real hero in your life. One could walk right through that door and you wouldn't bat an eye. Bakugo, a voice cut through. What? Bakugo snapped. For a half second, he realized his mistake. Mr. Aizawa? Everyone shouted. Their teacher said he wasn't going to be here at the hero training this afternoon, so why would he come back? A couple people from the back could see near the desk a yellow sleeping bag. Come with me, Aizawa said as he motioned for the boy to follow. You're out of your damn mind thinking I'm missing class. Bakugo snapped and tried to head out the door. Aizawa rolled his eyes before his capture weapon snapped off around his neck and wrapped around Bakugo's arms and torso. A couple students gasped at the sight. It wasn't a question, Aizawa said as he flashed his quirk as a warning. Also, don't make me use my quirk. It gives me a serious dry eye. What the hell? Why is your scarf so damn strong? Bakugo grumbled, forced to follow behind for the alternative was getting dragged. All Might, next time, get a hold of your students, Aizawa said as they disappeared into the halls as Bakugu's screaming could still be heard. All Might simply nodded. Geez, Eraserhead scared him more than most people. He was right though. He should have quieted them down or had them do this later. Class, learning to be heroes, wasn't the time to start petty fights. Once the blonde was out of earshot, Mina pouted before she asked, "What's totally with him?" "I don't know, but a man doesn't act like that for no reason," Kirishima commented. "Regardless, Mr. Aizawa is taking care of that cretin," Ida said, nodding to himself. Now, children. You'll realize each hero and heroine training has a reason for why they want to be a hero and their ambitions. Some heroes want to save others while others may have more selfish reasons. What's important is getting to know your classmates and future allies so you may grow together and one day become fabulous heroes yourselves. Now let's start. Time's a-wastin'. Wow, that's what it's like to have the symbol of peace as our teacher, Uraraka said as they all watched him go. Would have been better if he hadn't read from a script. A few thought as they saw him put a piece of paper in his pocket. As Aizawa dragged the blonde down the hall, Bakugu fought with all his might to escape the binding. His quirk was useless as the teacher would just turn around and erase it. He didn't do anything, and he thought this talk was supposed to be after classes. He needed to show those extras that he was here and he meant business. He needed to get to graduation or wherever it allowed to finally start doing something or make others get their asses in gear. What the hell? What do you want? That's like the most important class. Bakugu screamed when Aizawa finally let him go when they were close enough to the lounge. I'm not saying this to feed your ego, but you demonstrated enough battle prowess during the entrance exam that you can afford to miss one class. Judging by what I overheard, it seems like it might be best if we have this conversation now instead of later. Aizawa explained as he opened the door and pointed for him to go inside. Bakugu grumbled as he did as he was told, accepting he wasn't escaping this. Might as well get this over with, and maybe he might have time to get to heroics. If need be, he'll do whatever they were doing by himself. He didn't need any extra baggage. Go ahead and sit down. This won't be a short talk, Aizawa said, motioning to the chair. I'd rather not, he grumbled. Suit yourself. I'm going to go ahead and apologize now for bringing this up, but I want to know more about the Mizudafa massacre, Aizawa said straight to the point. Bakuga was shocked. He stomped his foot down and took a couple steps forward toward his teacher. What the hell? Why the hell would you want to know more about that? Why do you even care? I can become a hero despite that. Settle down, Aizawa said sternly. I wasn't finished. Then get on with it. Aizawa sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. That headache was coming on, and he was about to open that bag of cats. A bag of feral cats that couldn't wait to sink their claws and teeth into whatever they first laid eyes on. I want to know your side of what happened. My side? Nobody wanted to know my fucking side. Well, I do. Bakuga said before pulling out the chair and plopping down. He realized his teacher didn't make a comment about it. Good. He tried looking anywhere but at him. The wall. The window. The shelves. His side, huh? Police took his statement like everyone else. Everyone else being the few people who passed, hadn't been home at the time, and his parents. However, once it was mentioned he took a crack to the head, they said he must have imagined Izuku getting taken when he was actually killed. Probably eaten by one of the monsters. His parents even agreed with his statement and were only told not to fuel his childish ideations about his friend. Eventually, his piercing red eyes found a good spot as any. He didn't say anything right away and kept his eyes trained to the floor. He then sighed. Take your time, Aizawa finally said. Bakuga did take his time of what seemed like a good 10 minutes. Aizawa didn't mind. He had all day as his patrol didn't start until way after dark and all the teachers were in class. The only staff member that might be sticking their nose where it didn't belong was the principal. Wasn't like he didn't have to report to that mousebear dog whatever he was anyway about this. Eventually the boy sighed and opened his mouth, this time without the screaming. He was eerily calm. I guess I should start from the beginning. I used to be a piece of shit. I bullied the one person who gave a shit about me because he wanted to. It was Izuku's 10th birthday, and my parents forced me to go to his party with them. While we were in his room, we heard screaming, and this tall fucker with creepy-ass fingers murdered his mom. I tried to fight him, but like a weakling I was tossed aside. I remember that man taking Izuku like he owned him. Aizawa really didn't want to ask, and he was honestly afraid to know the answer. But as a teacher and pro, or a decent fucking human being meant asking the tough questions no one wants to answer. Bakugu, was your family ever given proper therapy for this? Bakugu snorted before his eyes narrowed and he let out what Aizawa could only describe as a growl. I don't need anyone else telling me to forget. Izuku's still alive, and I'm going to fucking find him if it's the last thing I do. So the answer was yes. He and most likely his family received some kind of therapy after the event. The new question was if it had helped his parents any. So many different scenarios, and it made him wonder to talk to his parents, making sure everything was all right. Clearly whoever this boy saw went around it the wrong way, and he completely shut anyone else who'd tell him otherwise. He was stuck to his mindset, and that wasn't going to change without solid evidence. He could respect that despite it not being healthy. Aizawa sighed. I'm not saying that Midoriya is dead. I'll be honest, after almost 6 years his chances aren't high. I don't have to remind you that you know this. No one should blame you for being hopeful. The only sound Aizawa got in response was heavy breathing. He was expecting the boy to snap like he did earlier, to go off on a rampage. He looked up to the boy to see him biting his lip as he tried not to cry. It's so fucked. My mom's best friend was killed in front of her. A lot of people were fucking slaughtered. My best friend was kidnapped. As a stupid kid, I hoped he'd disappear, and then it actually happened. Afterward, nothing felt right. I saw that I was weak, and that damn nerd was miles ahead of me. That night shouldn't have made me better, but it did. I turned around and realized that I wasn't a hero at all. He was. He saved my family when I couldn't. I promised myself I'd become a hero that was strong enough to never let anything like that happen again. I was going to beat any villain who got in my way. You took what happened and learned. That's admirable, and it's what a hero, a person, should do. But deep down you're still angry, and it's building. You're haunted by what happened, and that's what is driving you and the choices you're making. That kind of drive can be fatal if not approached correctly, and it doesn't end well for anyone. I know so, Aizawa explained. As he looked into the boy's eyes, he couldn't help thinking about that day when he was just about his age. He remembered the rain, the fallen buildings, the injury on his arm that dripped, and the blood underneath the rubble. Tell me, did this help? Aizawa could see that he didn't want to admit it. He was once in that seat, ignored the pain surrounding him until it overflowed and he was drowning in it. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. Taking care of himself seemed like such a chore. Those necessities were a waste of time away from what needed to be done. He needed to become strong to save everyone, so no one else died. Luckily, he had friends there to sit his ass down and knock some sense into him. Yes, he fought tooth and nail against them, but they did it because they cared about him and didn't want to see throw everything away. In the end, he used that drive and turned it toward the future heroes of tomorrow. He'd make sure they were trained, taken care of, so they wouldn't go and instantly lose their precious lives thinking that they had to do the impossible. Bakugu was doing the same with his classmates as he snapped and allowed anger to fuel his choices. All this weight was eventually either going to get him trouble or hurt any future relationships he might have with his future, if he made it that far. As his teacher, he would make sure he made it. Shut up, Bakugu gritted out. It's fine, but I'm talking about accepting that what happened was traumatic and not just solely focusing on where you are now. As your teacher, I'm going to recommend you talk with the school's counselor. A couple sessions, and if you don't prefer it, we'll find an alternative. As you are now, you're more likely to hurt your future. Bakugu, I refuse to allow this self-destructive behavior to continue, and if I don't see improvement, I will expel you. Bakugu snapped his eyes up to see that his teacher was serious with that dead, tired stare. Instead of getting angry that his teacher could rip out his dreams from underneath him, he nodded, agreeing to the terms. Getting some of what welled inside off his chest made him feel lighter. There was also someone who believed Izuku still had a chance. Izuku would have loved having him as a teacher and would probably update his entry. If you don't mind, can I bring something to show you? Bakugu asked. Sure, Aizawa answered. He watched closely. No bark. No bite. Whatever it was had to be important to him. He was about a couple minutes into class when he realized he forgot something. That, and he wanted to see if the missing student would be returning to class. The new heroics teacher decided to check in with Class 1, A's homeroom teacher, and grab those much-needed papers. At least let the man know he rallied the students after leaving, turned it into a learning experience, and to not be hard on the boy, as he was more than welcome to come back to class. Plus, he kind of needed him back after sending young Shinso down to support to fill out his request to get his costume. Missing young Bakugo made the entire class a little easier, not having an extra person when splitting into teams, but missing another person would hinder his idea. Oh well, sometimes being a hero or villain wasn't fair, so someone would be alone. Perhaps young Todoroki would be the best option to single out. The battle trials were to hope the students learned what it meant to be a hero or in the mindset of a villain. In all honesty, he didn't want to eavesdrop, but when he first heard a couple comments about the massacre, he knew he had to stay and listen. Although he wasn't said to be on the case, Tsukachi said he'd update him when he knew something of value. Everything about that night screamed his greatest nemesis. A witness that later died described the beings that attacked them as monsters, and some used multiple quirks. Now he had kidnapped a child all those years ago. Was that his newest experiment? Using an innocent child. Hearing the scrapping of the legs on the floor, All Might booked it from the hall before anyone saw him. Those papers he forgot could wait. It wasn't like he needed them to teach the class or anything, maybe. Bakugo walked out of Mr. Aizawa's office with a piece of paper clenched in his hands. He willed himself not to set off his quirk. Begrudgingly, talking with his teacher helped, and he said if that made him better than talking to a professional would do so too. That and Mr. Aizawa had already proven being 100% dead serious in any threat, more like a promise in anything he said. He agreed to see Hound Dog, but that didn't mean he was going to like it. He didn't have to accept that Izuku could be dead, but it just meant he had to work through what happened and learn to take even bigger strides forward. That would take one step further toward his goals. Goals those extras didn't understand in the slightest. What the hell do you want? Bakugo asked the figure leaning up against the wall. The boy in question simply sighed. A pale figure placed his glass on the newspaper in front of him as he sat on the stool of an old bar. The picture of Japan's greatest hero, the symbol of peace, slowly became distorted from the condensation pouring off. Eventually, all that was left was a murky black, white, and gray figure set up to be lost. The man almost laughed in the hope that would bring. Did you see this? What a joke. Saying All Might's a teacher now. What will the world think if the mighty symbol of peace is killed by the villains? What do you think, Brad? A scrawny boy with pale skin and large eyes stared off distantly as he listened to the white-haired boy's question. Not that the asker expected an answer. Kid was simply just wasting away at this point, and only kept alive because of Sensei's orders and the doctor's obsession with having to know more about what made him tick. The green-haired boy couldn't be bothered with it. At this point, All Might, hell, any hero, wasn't going to save him. What the hell do you want, eyebags? Bakugo barked. Relax, asshole, Shinso said, pushing off the wall and walking toward him. I'm not here to give you shit as much as I think you deserve it. Then what the hell do you want? Bakugo grounded out. I just wanted to say, despite this angry facade, I see what you're trying to do. You and I aren't that different. We're each trying to accomplish a goal that doesn't include anyone else but ourselves, Shinso explained as his tired eyes bore into Bakugo's angry red. What the hell do you know? And why do you give a shit? Bakugo snarled. It was really shitty if this was him admitting that he overheard the extremely private conversation he just had with Mr. Aizawa. If he heard anything that went on, he was blasting him to hell, and he wouldn't even have to think about how he just got moved up. He'd make sure he was nothing but a scorch mark on the attendance. I got lucky that Mr. Aizawa is giving me a chance. My quirk isn't as flashy as yours. It didn't get me a free ride into the hero course. Unlike you, you were blessed with a powerful quirk that doesn't rely on the element of surprise. Are you going to get to your point or just keep wasting my time? Bakugo asked. I'm saying that I'm someone who understands. You don't know shit. This isn't some have and hold crap where we become best friends. I am not here based on any selfish notions you and those others extras might have of me. You're here for yourself. I'm here for someone else, asswipe. Bakugo said as started to stomp off, completely done with the conversation. No one understood what he went through after that day. The couple nights he spent in the hospital bombarded by those dumbass therapists and jackass police trying to tell him wasn't thinking right because he got knocked around. No one listened, so, Why should he even bother trying if it wasn't going to get him anywhere? That was why he stopped going to the stations. After 3 years, they just seemed to think he was just some bug. Aizawa was the first person who wanted to listen and had something at least worth hearing. And you don't think I'm not here because of someone else? That's what I actually wanted to talk to you about. Ugh. Bakugo groaned as turned around. For someone who apparently has little to say, you sure take your sweet-ass time getting to the fucking point. I'm guessing you don't have a brother, do you? Bakugo almost snorted and laughed at the thought. He hoped not, and was pretty sure if his parents did have another kid, he'd be the first to know. His parents were better than most, and no one better tell them that. Especially not his hag of a mom. Sure, he was a carbon copy of his hag and his old man was a pushover, but he knew they loved him. They made sure they focused on their family, and they were never one to put him down about his endeavors. They supported him as long as it didn't get him into any trouble. What fuck are you on about? Bakugo asked. Shinso sighed. He knew what he was signing up for when he decided to confront the boy. Shinso looked down at the floor. The moment was probably one of the scariest days of his life. But it was also a day he had hope. Months went by before he actually felt safe, and now he at least has his guardian to watch over him along with a couple others. However, as much as he didn't want to go back there, he wanted to see if he could find him again and thank him. About 4 years ago, when I was around 12, my parents died in a car accident. I'm not sure if you know this, but the social system in Japan is shit. Especially to those who don't have the most desirable of quirks. Anyway, it took someone a couple days before anyone noticed a child had been alone, and by that point I was wandering the streets in search of help. I didn't know where my parents were, and everyone just told me to go home or find a hero. I ended up not in the safest district, and this old man who looked like a doctor attempted to help me. Shinso started explaining. Bakugo noticed how he sarcastically said doctor. Was this some shady black market shit? In this society, he wouldn't put it past anyone doing sketchy things for the sake of power or bats hit insanity. What's that got to do with him or this supposed brother? And your point? Bakugo asked. The doctor attempted to drag me along saying that he'd help me find my way. I didn't trust the man and he grabbed me. Next thing I knew, a boy came out of nowhere grabbing the creep's arm and exploding it. The boy got backhanded, but at least gave me a chance. They must have known each other, but I didn't stick around long enough to find out. The boy smiled at me before yelling at me to escape along with an address. That address led me to a hero who actually helped me. That kid saved me, using a quirk that looked exactly like yours. Bakugo's eyes widened. No way. It couldn't have been. Memories flashed through his mind as he went to attack Izuku, and somehow Izuku defended himself using his quirk. For a while, Bakugo thought it was just as the nerd said it was that night. He was mistaken, and it was his own explosion. He was quirkless. Bakugo knew what he saw that night. Izuku used his quirk somehow, which means if Shinso saw some boy use his quirk, then, without missing a beat, he stepped towards Shinso and grabbed him by the shoulders. What did he look like? How was he? Where was this? Calm down, Blasty. Shinso was surprised by the response he received. He thought the blonde would literally and figuratively blow up, that no one else had a quirk like him, and he was crazy. However, this response looked panicked, and dare he say he saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. Removing his shoulders from the very literal hand grenades who had a tight grip on him. What did he look like? Bakugo grounded out. It's been a while, but all I remember about the kid is that he was green like everywhere. Bakugo sucked in a breath as he felt his heart start going a mile a minute. The event Shinso was talking about had taken place roughly 2 years or so after he was kidnapped. Not too many people had green everywhere, which meant hair and eyes. If he was seen alive, then there must be an even greater chance Izuku was currently still alive and probably still trapped with the villains who took him in the first place. Fucking finally, Bakugo said as he bit his lip with a smirk. Not the response I was expecting. Shut your damn mouth. Despite coming from an extra, that's the best damn thing I've heard all day. Bakugo said. You know him? Shinso asked with a slight hint of surprise in his voice. Once Shinso calmed down and finally got the much-needed help, he thought about the kid who saved him. Was he okay after that? Did they hurt him for saving him from whatever horrible outcome would have befell him? He remembered the smile, and Shinso really thought things would be okay. Yeah, I fucking know him. He saved me too. Shinso looked at the seriousness of Bakugo's expression. No anger. No sadness. He looked like acceptance. Shinso then thought about what he had said when he blew up in class today. A lot more made sense than a couple hours, hell, even minutes ago as he waited for the blonde boy. You senseless morons have never seen a real hero in your life. One could walk right through that door, and you wouldn't bat an eye. Is he who you were talking about? Shinso asked. This had to be the same boy. He owed that boy his life and the life he currently lives. Because of him, he was now one step closer to his dreams sooner than he thought. Apparently, Bakugu also owed him, or at least something close to it. He hoped he was still alive, for both their sakes. Yeah, that stubborn bastard is still trying to be a hero. His name is Izuku Midoriya. You think he's still alive? Shinso asked. Please. He needed to be alive. He'd accept if he wasn't and keep going for him. But that would leave an empty weight in his chest. His ass better be, or I'm going to kill him. Before either one could continue, a string of meows, that could be called singing, broke through tension. Bakugu's eyes deadpanned as he thought, what the fuck? As without any comment or change of emotion, Shinso simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. That's my guardian. I should go. Talk to you later, Shinso said, pocketing his phone and grabbing his bag that was leaning against the wall. Shinso felt calmed by the new information he learned, being pleased with himself that he sought out Bakugu. That moment was all he thought about ever since he saw Bakugu's quirk that morning. Clearly, Bakugu wasn't the boy who saved him unless he dyed his hair and got a new face, but maybe he would know something. Quirks are generally special to each individual, with similarities only running in families. So the boy, Izuku Midoriya, wasn't family, but Bakugu knew exactly who he was talking about, and they shared some history, which was a start. Shinso would have preferred to stay longer and pry, but his guardian, the hero Midoriya led him to, was waiting so they could head home. Regardless, he got answers to the questions he never thought he'd get. He only admitted this to a couple people, but that day changed him and it plagued him. He was alone, and no one understood what it was like living with a sense of guilt that one either had to swallow down or throw in everyone's face. Despite being told otherwise, he was selfish then. He couldn't know what the green-haired boy risked to save him, and he never thought about it until later. At that moment, he only cared about running away and saving himself. A hero would have saved that boy too. He beat himself up about it until a smart man his guardian was friends with basically pulled his head out of his ass, and he saw the experience as opportunity. He was going to grow from that into someone he could be proud of. A hero. Hey, eyebags. Bakugu's voice broke through the silence of the halls and stopped Shinsu's departure. Shinso turned his head to the side to motion. He was listening, and he heard what he never thought he'd ever hear. Thank you. When Bakugu returned to class the next morning, all eyes were on him. He wasn't deaf. He heard them whispering before he walked in the door. They all were wondering if he was going to be in class having been expelled or transferred out. Sorry fuckers, he was here to stay, and just his presence should tell them that. Besides, it was too damn early to deal with that shit, so he just silently went to his seat. Shinso sat quietly as Kaminari attempted to keep talking to him, only getting ignored or one-word answers. After their talk yesterday, Bakugu was content that at least one person in the class had a brain and he could tolerate him. Granted, he might have more information on Izuku, but still, he was more useless than the rest of the morons. Hey man, what do you want, shitty hair? Bakugu asked. The name's Kirishima. I think it's manly for whatever reason you're here, and that you didn't take anything lying down. No one asked for your opinion. I'm here for my fucking reasons, and I don't have to share it with the rest of you idiots. Now leave me alone. Yeah, he wasn't going to give anything to these nosy-ass extras. The bright red hair sighed and went back to his seat as Aizawa announced they needed to get started as they had a lot to cover. Glancing back a moment, some stick-up-his-ass looked like he wanted to continue his verbal beat-down from yesterday, but the narrowing eyes and disapproving stare from Aizawa stopped both of them before any brawls could break out. They're all dumb as shit anyway because they voted for him to be class president and Ponytail for vice. That wasn't going to end well. He's going to drive them up the wall to be more like him, and Bakugu refuses to put the stick back. At the end of it all, Aizawa mentioned a field trip that would be coming up, and they should prepare for it by making sure costumes and support gear were all in order. He didn't need to worry about that. Hey, Teach. I brought what I wanted to show you, Bakugu said. Out of his bag, he pulled out a notebook that was kept in a plastic sleeve. It looked a little worn, but regardless, it was well taken care of as he slipped out and handed it over. Hero Analysis for the Future Volume 10. Aizawa read. I'm going to assume this isn't yours. Hell no. Open it to page 18. Bakuga did what he said and flipped it open. Staring back at him was a rather simple drawing of himself that was surprising well drawn, especially since he tended to not show himself. This was also roughly 6 years old, and even back then Aizawa made it a mission to be undetected. Various points were coming off certain place, and quite a few were jotted down underneath in a messy scribble, but still readable. Goggles used to not tell who and where he's looking. Does that mean it needs a direct line of sight to work? Could his quirk be used to erase another person's quirk through glass? Can the quirk bounce off mirrors and hit targets behind him? Hair raises when using quirk. Most likely falls when inactive. Could he tie it back in order to not give it away when it's active? Does this affect the special cloth he uses? Do they resonate with one another? Doesn't appear to work on mutant types. A special cloth is used to snare multiple villains at once. Useful support for long distances, so those whose quirks he can't erase stay as far away as possible. An agile fighter, so he needs to be fast and stealthy. Essentially quirkless. Bakugu, these are rather impressive and detailed. Who do they belong to? Aizawa asked as he closed the notebook. Izuku. Damn nerd has 10 of these waiting at my house for when he comes back. Little stalker. I remember him telling me about this one day. I ignored him, but I thought you'd like to see you have at least one fan. Ignoring the jab, Aizawa just asked, do you mind if I keep this for a bit? I sure as hell better get it back. You will. I want to show it to someone else who will be delighted to see it. Aizawa confirmed. He also wanted to look at it more in depth and then decide if he'd show to the principal. TCH. Fine, but if I don't get it back, I'll blast your coffee. Bakugu grumbled as he stalked out of the classroom toward the cafeteria. Aizawa flipped through the notebook as he sat at his desk, sipping his coffee. These were well written and very detailed, especially for a 10-year-old. Bakuga mentioned that he had 10 of these, and since this was number 10, so it had to be the most recent. He was interested to see the earlier ones, and if they shared the same level of analysis. This kid had potential with this alone, showing the tenacity to learn from everything around him. He knew he asked the team to keep the notebook to show to another, but now he had doubts about showing them to the principal. If the principal got his grubby paws on Izuku, who knows what will happen to the poor kid? Did I say you could look at that? Aizawa asked the tall man leaning over his shoulder. The man was only taller because of his obnoxious hair that cut off the lighting. You must be really into that, huh? Yamada said. It's not your concern. Aizawa answered. Haraha. From what I saw, those are impressive. From a student of yours? No, just someone I've taken an interest in. From general studies? Yamada questioned. He had already sniped one student from there already. Was he looking to fill the final spot in Class 1A before the sports festival? Aizawa gritted his teeth. No, he doesn't go here. Don't you have a class to teach or something? Nah, Yamada said, plopping into his chair next to him. I'm about to go to the radio station for a bit before coming back. You were so into that you didn't hear me. That's surprising. Aizawa deadpanned. He was right though, even if he didn't want to admit it. He didn't hear him enter, and he was so engrossed he didn't notice how much time had passed either. Not cool, bro, Yamada said, giving him a light shove. Anyway, Hitoshi came to me last night about it again, and I cried when thanked me. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. He didn't want to say he was eavesdropping, but the two students were having a not quiet conversation outside the teacher's lounge. He might have heard everything and was pleased Shinso had talked to Bakugu. Oh, about. You know what I'm talking about, yo, Yamada said. He said he got some answers and was seeing what all we've been telling him the past few years. I was so proud of him we went to that new kitty cafe. I know you said kids weren't your thing, but I've got to hand it to you. You've been a real pal these last few years with Hitoshi and me. Just returning the favor, Aizawa simply replied. Hisashi smiled down at him. The raven-haired man didn't notice, but he was happy to see him taking responsibility. When Aizawa just fell off after second year, he knew he couldn't allow his friend to simply just waste his life away. He remembered dragging him around in his capture scarf, borderline kicking yet not screaming, about taking care of himself and talking to someone. Hisashi excelled in the talking part, while Namuri was all about self-care and putting him to sleep whether he wanted to or not. He wasn't going to lose anyone else, and he refused to lose Aizawa. Not after everything they'd been through. He couldn't picture his life without his introvert. I know. I was totally freaked out by this kid who randomly showed up at the radio station, and now I can't imagine life without that kid. Just know, my dude, that if anything like this happens to you, I'll be there 110%. Aizawa remembers that day quite well. He was taking a nap when his phone went off, disturbing him. Initially, he was planning to give the voice hero a piece of his mind when the worried voice came over asking if he could help him. Apparently, this preteen came rushing into the radio station, exclaiming he had been attacked by a creepy guy. Hisashi had been able to calm the kid down and bonded with him before he had even rolled out of bed. Eventually, Hisashi adopted the kid last year. When Shinso finally opened up about what happened, Hound Dog told them they should tell someone about the child. But of course the police said it was probably some kind doctor and a kid with an unstable quirk out for fresh air, and Hitoshi was just frightened by everything. It came to his surprise to learn that Bakugu's hero and Shinu's hero were the same kid. And like Bakugu, Shinso was having a difficult time accepting the death of his parents, that he had almost been kidnapped, and the unsettling feeling that something traumatic was pushing him forward. Good. This would be helpful to help him, both of them. I doubt that will happen, Aizawa said, closing the notebook and placing it inside his desk for safekeeping. Most likely only one other person would see the piece of paper that was placed alongside one of the pages. If he left his own notes and answers to give back to Midoriya when he was recovered, then that was his knowledge alone. Bakuga got on the bus, ignoring Ida as he blew an annoying whistle. He swallowed the urge to take it and shove it down his throat. Picking a window seat, he simply looked out, hoping this would go by as fast as possible, or at least learn something that'll be useful. At least he wasn't missing this class to talk about his feelings again. He didn't think he could do that again without mentally preparing for it. That crap fest didn't start until next week, and when he told his parents about how he'd have to stay after school on Tuesdays, they were happy and told him they were proud. He was making strides to better himself, and he'd have their support. He didn't mention Shinsu's story to them, as he was unsure how they'd take it. Yeah, and we still don't know anything about your quirk, Shinso. Sue said. I already said you'll know soon enough. Why bother with it now? It's not like it'll be of any use against a natural disaster. Shinso replied. Bakugu could hear the eye roll. Admittedly, he was rather curious, but it was clear that it wasn't a physical quirk. Well, if any of our classmates have pro-hero quirks, it's Todoroki and Bakugu, Kirishima said. Yeah, but Bakugu's always angry, so he'll never be that popular, Sue said. Shut your fucking trap, Bakugu yelled. You know, we basically just met you, so it's kind of telling that we know your personality is flaming crap mixed with garbage, Kaminari quipped. And apparently you all make assumptions and don't bother to learn. The bus went quiet as all eyes looked forward to see Aizawa staring back at them. His eyes were trained on each one of them. Hopefully the stare down would help each of these kids look inside themselves and not be petty teenagers. Yes, Bakuga's attitude wasn't seen as the most desirable, which Aizawa wanted to see improve, but as he talked with the kid yesterday, he understood him more. Hitoshi was the same. He didn't want to be close to anyone, afraid they'd just leave him or only see him for his quirk. This wasn't going to cut it once they finally became pros, and it will get them in hot water at any turn. Media relations, public relations, working relations. If one of those falters, a hero can kiss their career goodbye. That in turn hurts a hero's judgment, causes mistakes, and ultimately costs lives. I'm not defending anyone. Just open your eyes and see everyone for who they are, a person. We're here. Get off the bus and listen up. Welcome to the USJ, the unforeseen simulation joint. 13 greeted as everyone got off, looking forward to the giant dome that awaited the next step into becoming heroes. Chapter 4. The USJ was huge, with multiple sectors spread across the area, with each one showcasing a different disaster that could occur at any moment's notice throughout the world. Each within their own right could erupt society into chaos at the loss of control. Floods that drown everything in its wake. Shipwrecks that leave those stranded without a horizon in sight. Storms that blow so fierce nothing can fight against it, only to be caught tangled in the cross. Fires that burn lives and livelihoods away into nothing but ash. collapses that were the result of earthquakes or the aftermath of those who heroes couldn't stop in time. Bakugu simply rolled his eyes uninterested at the scene before him, unlike his classmates who gushed and awed at the sight before them, as they all were eager to get started with what was said to be the fundamental of hero work, saving lives. For the basic part, Bakugu could agree. He was going to save lives by beating the crap out of those who dare try anything before it was too late. Some disasters were caused by a villain, and if a hero takes them out before anything happens, saves a lot of trouble. Areas like the collapse zone weren't something society was ever going to have to worry about, because that would never happen. He wouldn't let it repeat itself. Holy crap, it looks like an amusement park. Kirishima said. 13 finished explaining all the zones created to help them combat anything they may come up against. First and foremost, I want to talk about quirks. As you might be aware, I have a powerful quirk. It's called Black Hole. I can use it to suck up anything and turn it into dust. Although I primarily work in rescue, my quirk can easily be used to kill, as can any of yours. The previous classes you've had should have enlightened you on how to use your quirks. But you also must be careful that your quirks do not hurt others along with yourselves. This case is about using your quirks to help and finding the limits in which you go to reach that goal. That's all I have to say. Thank you. 13 concluded. Quirks hurting their users weren't seen as desirable, but most quirks had some backlash that people had to overcome, whether it was for work or to live. Especially as a pro, a hero can't be a liability if they get taken out by their own power. They would just be useless, and someone else has to pick up their slack. As a pro, Bakuga knew he was going to have to go beyond the limit of his powers safely at times in order to win. He looked down at the gauntlet on his wrist. Maximum power without risk to his arms. All right, let's. Aizawa started. A flash of electricity sparked across the lights of the USJ, cracking as it cut the power to the area. The lights went out, and the area fell into dim darkness. Everyone voiced their concerns as an ominous sound echoed, attracting everyone's attention toward the center of the dome. What is that thing? Kirishima asked, pointing toward the purple mist that covered the plaza. Eventually, it stretched out, covering the plaza as people with various mutation quirks and builds walked out, each of them grinning up at them in sadistic pleasure as the students started to squirm with uneasiness that was slowly transforming into fear. This is real, and those are actual villains. 13 Protect the students. Aizawa's scarf flared at the same time as hair as it floated and flapped in a non-existent wind, as he then jumped into action and charged toward the villains. Red eyes flashed as 3 of the villains stuttered at the loss of their quirks. Quickly handling them, Aizawa found himself in the center of them, waiting to see which one would be stupid enough to attack next. He had to buy time until help could arrive. It would come. It had to. This all could be over in a blink of an damn it. Bakugu couldn't help but examine the misty bastard in front of him that was gloating. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he was so familiar. He gritted his teeth, trying to think of what the hell he could have seen such a villain. There was only really one instance where he had any encounter with villains, and he only got a good look at the one who put his hands on Izuku. It's a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we decided to invite ourselves to say hello. All Might was supposed to be here, and yet I see no sign of him. There must have been a change of plans we couldn't foresee. I suppose it doesn't matter. My role will be fulfilled. The smoke-like villain said in a deep, voided voice that seemed to have an echo to it. Forget asking questions, as he jumped to just take the guy down before he could do anything. Once he was taken down, then he would ask his questions. Hearing a war cry from beside, he saw that red shitty hair kid jump alongside him to attack. No, wait. 13 shouted. Bakugu smirked as the blast exploded in smoke and flames. It wasn't his strongest explosion to date, but that bastard wasn't getting back up from that. However, a hollow laugh echoed, and as the smoke disappeared, he panicked, seeing the attack missed. I see you live up to your school's reputation, but you should be more careful or someone might get hurt. The next thing he knew was he was engulfed in mist and overcome with darkness. Get the hell out of my way, Bakugu yelled as he blasted the floor, sending a group of villains hurtling toward the wall where they collapsed unconscious. He panted as he looked around the destruction caused by both the stage of the collapse zone and his own power. This would be where he was sent. About a dozen villains, if not more, were scattered around them groaning, licking their wounds, or knocked the fuck out thinking they could beat him. Finally, they were all down and would stay that way if they knew what was good for them. Small fries that were there to waste his time from getting back to wherever the hell that warp villain was at. He was the target, and next time he wouldn't miss. Let's go find everyone else in our class. They may need our help since we caused this problem in the first place. Kirishima said. You go right ahead and do that. I'm finding that warping bastard. Dude, why? We need to make sure everyone else is okay. Some people in our class don't have the offensive capabilities like we do. He had other matters more important than worrying about those who he remembered saying would get in his way like they were indirectly doing now. Amidst the fighting, he had finally figured it out. Although the memory was faint from losing consciousness soon after it all ended, he recognized that warp villain being there the night Izuku was taken. Izuku's smile faded in the purple darkness with only the screams of people being slaughtered echoing after as he faded himself. He was the reason for their escape. He was the reason no one found any evidence of the beasts who caused the absolute carnage at the scene. If he could capture the villain, then he could tell him, no, lead him to where they've taken Izuku. High school was turning ripe with the fruits of his endeavors. He found someone who wasn't incompetent in hearing the what-ifs that are true. He found someone who could place Izuku alive more recently than he could, and now Izuku could be in reach. What didn't you get, shitty hair? Bakuga snarled. I don't care about any of our classmates. The only one who is of any use to me is eyebags on a bare minimum. The rest of you are just in the way. Why is that? You went off on Ida the other day, and you seem to know what you're talking about. Heroes help one another. No shit, Sherlock. I know that. A hero saves those in front of him regardless of the cost. I'm going to be that hero, but I'm making sure I always come out on top. No one ever fucking believed me before, so why is it any different now? Bakuga said, kicking aside one of the villain's knives. You don't seem like a liar and are super upfront. Someone doesn't have such a drive unless it's for a good reason. Did someone die, so you need to honor them? Or is this revenge? Because that's not the best or manliest way to go, Kirishima said. Shut the fuck up. Bakuga snapped as he grabbed the sash across Kirishima's chest. They looked one another directly in the eye, with neither one breaking it off. This spiky-haired bastard wouldn't give up and let it go. The other boy's red eyes showed no fear as Bakuga's own rage-filled ones pierced any word that could come out of his mouth. The smell of burning fabric and the cloth burning through snapped Bakuga out of his anger-induced trance as he realized he lost control of his quirk for a second. Taking a step back along with a breath, he shoved everything down. Now wasn't the time. He had places to get to, and this extra was just in the way. He growled, tossing the remaining pieces in his hand to the side, and shoving past the red couldn't lose it. He needed to stay focused. I haven't lost anyone yet. I won't lose again. Kirishima couldn't imagine what that was like. It was like All Might said. None of them knew what each of them went through to get where they are. Sure, back in middle school he wasn't brave and rather dull and powerless, but now he was becoming the person, the hero, he wanted to be. That meant helping out those with good intentions, and despite the harshness, Kirishima could see Bakuga wasn't here for being selfish. However, Bakuga sounded like he needed to be honest with himself. You have, Kirishima said sadly. What's it to you? And I said he wasn't dead, damn it. Bakuga growled as he made his way toward the staircase. He was done with this conversation. This wasn't the time, place, or company to talk about his past shit. Why don't you let us help you, man? As heroes, we should charge right in and save everyone together. Kirishima pushed. Why do you fucking care? Because you seem like a cool dude, bro, and you're here for someone else, not yourself. And that's so manly. Bakuga looked at the other red-eyed boy as he shared a determination in his eyes that had not wavered once. He kept thinking back to his talk with Aizawa. After brooding on the thought, he agreed with Ibag Sr. He did feel better about talking about, and apparently swapping stories around the campfire proved beneficial. Shinso had seen Izuku 4 years ago, and that was certainly better than 6. Shinso would prove useful as someone to get information from, and well, someone would be useful for backup and taking care of weaker villains he couldn't waste his time on. Already he proved he knew how to defend himself and could hold his own in a fight. However, despite looking like a dumbass, Bakuga knew that no hero is just going to rush in without knowing some key points. That warp villain was there the night I was involved in an attack. He was the escape route for someone who took someone important to me. That's who I'm here for. A damn nerd who just had to be a hero, and now it's my turn to save him. He's waiting for me. I'm going to find him if it's the last thing I do. I don't care who I have to take down, and I'll destroy anyone who gets in my way, villain or not. It all starts with those villains, and that bastard's going to answer my questions and fucking tell me where he's at. Bakugo revealed not once looking at him. He couldn't take the pity he was going to get. Getting it from Aizawa was bad enough. He turned to look at that loser and waited for some cheesy response, but got what he thought could be an even stupider reaction. What the hell? Kirishima was sniffling as small tears showed in his eyes as he placed his fist over his heart. There wasn't any amount of pity in his eyes. He almost looked happy, and Bakugo wanted to gag. He wasn't sure which one was worse. That's so chivalrous. I knew you were a true man, Kirishima said as he covered his eyes as those manly tears leaked out as he swelled his pride. Kirishima knew that Bakugo's drive had to be something manly, but never thought it'd be something like saving his friend. It was so awesome that he was just going at it despite seemingly having next to nothing to go off of. Don't worry, man. You can count on me to back you up. You're going to need all the help you can get, and with me here, you should have no problem. I'll help you find this friend of yours. Ugh. Bakugo groaned as he stalked off. He hated when Aizawa was right. It was pissing him off. Aizawa panted as he took out another 3 villains with the use of only one of his arms while being barely able to see. Luckily, his capture weapon served as multiple appendages covering this unfortunate mishap, and in his years as pro, he made sure to work on being able to combat being blinded. This was becoming a grueling battle of how long can he hold out, which he feared wouldn't be much longer. His eyes burned, and his body screamed at the need to collapse. Midoriya's notes were right. He wasn't made for long, drawn-out battles and heavily relied on stealth. Steadily, the time between erasers was shortening, and the villains had already exploited that by the damage on his elbow and his face. The hand villain had charged him, mumbling about something he wasn't able to hear. He held him off until he realized it was too late, and he had blinked. As a result, the skin on his elbow had disintegrated into nothing but flakes that littered the ground, and his goggles followed suit. The muscle was exposed and blood pulsing out, dropping red splatters every time he moved. The pain throughout his other muscles and eyes were nothing compared to this, but he gritted his teeth. With his goggles gone, the villain had been able to take off a couple layers of skin around his eyes that unfortunately erupted in blood that ran down his face. While he was able to blink away some, it was making it impossible to use his quirk. He couldn't go down, or he'd lose not only his life, but the innocent lives of the 19 students trapped alongside him. Right now, the villains were at a standstill, watching to see what his next move would be. That was fine. He could catch his breath and wait for their impatience. Aizawa looked at the humongous beast with an exposed brain, large teeth, and dead eyes. Now that he got a good look at it, his mind was racing, putting the pieces together from the case files he read roughly a week ago. Although the witness statements were few and inconclusive, they each described terrifying beasts similar to this one in various shapes and sizes. Were these people connected to those who were responsible for the Mizudafa massacre? Were they the ones who kidnapped Izuku Midoriya? A child he had no connection with, but already felt the strings attaching just from his small talks with Bakugo and reading his notes. What did they want with that bright child who had an even brighter future? He hoped the abomination in front of him wasn't the answer. He cursed when an explosion near the main entrance distracted him. He hoped that it wasn't Bakugo being reckless, and a bit of him hoped that was salvation. The other Misty Warp villain had returned and said one of the students escaped, so it wouldn't be long. He blinked, and next he knew the large villain was right next to him, looking down at him with a look that hungered with bloodlust. By the way, Eraserhead, I'm not the final boss, the hand villain said as the other raised his hand to strike with a deafening and inhuman screech. A shriek of pure joy laced with agony, finally being uncaged. It would be over in seconds, and there was nothing he could do about it. Even if he tried to dodge, the beast would just grab him, and he didn't think his quirk would work on it. In a millisecond, a gust of wind blew by, and Aizawa opened his eyes to find himself away from the hulking villain. I'm sorry, Aizawa. I should have been here. All Might apologized with regret in his voice as he placed him back on his feet. Never before had Aizawa been more grateful to see All Might. Better late than never, Aizawa grumbled as he took the chance to wipe off some of the blood from his face. The hand villain's laugh echoed, breaking the second conversation between the two heroes. I guess our game continues. He chuckled as his head turned in sickly staggered movement. That's what you think, bastards. Out of nowhere, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki jumped into the fray, coming from different directions. Bakugo pinned the warp villain as Kirishima tried to attack the hand villain, who dodged. Ice froze the ground around them, not hitting them or the students, but effectively trapping the beast in place, who roared. Get out of here! Aizawa yelled at his foolish students. They were going to get themselves killed. This wasn't like it was in class the other day. This was something he didn't want to happen. He couldn't lose another one. The man said to have a cold heart wouldn't be able to take it. Guess I found your body that time, you smoky bastard. Now you guys are going to answer our questions, or your ride home gets it. Bakugo shouted as he popped off his quirk. Kirojiri groaned as burns laced across his body. What is that? Kirishima said as he looked on at the beast that was encased in ice. One of the poorly trained villains said it's a being created to destroy All Might. Todoroki commented. The white-haired hand villain snorted. Nomu, if you please. The beast, Nomu, roared as the ice shattered into a million pieces. Within those millions of pieces were part of his body that had succumbed to frostbite. The muscles pulsed as they shook before growing. The being before them had multiple quirks. How was that even possible? Clearly it was as the villain explained it, so as it was happening before their very eyes. Taking advantage of the opening, All Might rushed forward and slammed into the Nomu, who met his fist with its own regenerated one. The shockwave from the blast blew everyone in disarray, and Aizawa fortunately found himself near his students, but unfortunately not too far from the other two villains. Mr. Aizawa, are you all right? Kirishima asked, concerned about seeing the injuries laced with blood. Yes. Now get out here and get back to the entrance. This is no place for you. He instructed as he held his ground against the shock waves of forces and winds caused by the literal fist fight happening before them. Hopefully, despite the battle going on before them, they'd be able to do what they were asked and get back to safety. No fucking way. Bakugo growled as he planted his feet into the ground. He was staying right there, and they would have to pry him from his spot and would explode anyone who dared try. A giant explosion echoed through the dome as All Might sent the Nomu flying through the roof into the stratosphere. The older pro hero panted as the ground was broken around him into multiple pieces, and a comforting light shined down through along with falling debris. Soon the others would arrive, and this would be over. Despite the odds, they prevailed, and from what he knew of the situation, no one had died. He beat my Nomo. The villain cried like a toddler in the middle of a tantrum as he scratched at his neck. As his sharp nails scratched up and down, red marks appeared that would eventually slowly bleed. How dare he? I'm so mad. If only Nomu were here to crush you all. Tomura Shigaraki, we should make our escape before reinforcements arrive, Kirojiri said. Shigaraki yelled in frustration at losing this game. It was over. He had lost to heroes. They also managed to ruin his plans every time. Now it was All Might, but first it was him. That meddling brat who was finally learning to stay where he belongs until Master recovers. Fine, let's go home. I'll take my frustrations out on that brat. Bakugo sucked in a breath as he overheard them. Said breath that immediately felt like it got punched right out. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He was speechless as he reached out. For a second, he felt powerless to do anything. It could be. He could be on the other side. His mind stopped as he watched the warp gather himself and spread around this Shigaraki. They were about to escape, leaving behind nothing but useless underlings, no answers, and the closest he's ever gotten to saving Izuku vanishing into nothing but a what-if. Like his quirk, he felt something explode within him. Get back here, damn it! Bakugo screamed as he exploded and charged after the villain. They would not get away. Not when he was so close. He's waited 6 years, and he refused to wait around any longer. Izuku could be on the other side of that gate. Bakugo no, Aizawa yelled. Aizawa cursed himself for not predicting this outcome. If he noticed that these villains could have ties to Midoriya, then it was almost certain that Bakugo did as well. Bakugo was willing to do anything, to make sure Izuku Midoriya made it home. He wouldn't accept a chance to escape, and in the adrenaline of it all, and the information gained, this was as close as he'd ever been. A boy like Bakugo wouldn't let that go so easily. Aizawa jumped forward, simultaneously tossing out his capture weapon. That missed the target. He knew his aim could be off, not having access to his other arm and sight impaired, but luckily he jumped after the blonde that was still arm's reach. He grabbed the boy around the arm and yanked as hard as he could, flinging him back away from any potentially dangerous situations that may arise. However, it was only seconds after he realized his mistake. Aizawa's eyes widened, realizing what was happening as the mist engulfed him, leaving Bakugo's surprised and seething eyes being the last thing he saw as he was safely in All Might's arms. At least he wasn't going to lose two of his kids to these villains. Chapter 5. Aizawa slammed into the wooden floor of wherever the hell the villains warped to and immediately sprang up into a crouching position, taking notice of his surroundings. Despite the blood coating his face and eyes, he could make out what was a dusty, dim bar. The walls were lined with glasses and cheap alcohol that he was, curiously enough, wanting to raid for the days he was at school. Looked at those kids and thought, I need a drink. Yes, they all got into UA, the best hero school in the country, but it still didn't change the fact some of them were dumbass. Now he just needed to get back to those said dumbass. He wasn't going to leave those kids. He'd die before letting anything harm them before they graduated. Afterward, they should be able to make rational decisions on their own to protect their lives. That, and then they'll be society's problem. His capture weapon flared up as he had the activation for his quirk at the ready to make sure these villains wouldn't pull any nasty surprises. Luckily, from when All Might arrived to now provided time for the blood loss surrounding his face to slow, and he was able to mostly clean his eyes. He couldn't risk being warped to anywhere else or get killed by the other villain's quirk that could turn things into dust. His injuries throbbed as a painful reminder. If he could just escape, finding another pro, or at least finding a mode of contact should be easy. He knew chasing after Bakugo wasn't logical, but neither was allowing his stupidly rash student to meet this fate. These villains wouldn't bat an eye and would either kill him or who knew what. Despite what connotation he might have, it wasn't smart to rush. They should have attempted to capture these villains and see if they knew anything. There were also the underlings they brought. They might not have exactly the information they were looking for, but one or two might have overheard something and will exchange it for a plea deal. It looks like we picked up a hitchhiker when that brat tried to follow us. Looking out for your students is pretty cool, Eraserhead. However, I don't need any extra weights. Kurogyri, show our uninvited guest the door. Wait, a voice said over the television that was placed at the end of the counter by the wall. Looking over, only the audio was playing. I want to examine his quirk. Capture him. Aizawa cursed at this unfortunate turn of events. Whoever was on the other side had to know a great deal about him to even think about his quirk. No one looks twice at him in public about him being a pro, and he liked it that way. This voice obviously knew about him if they wanted him and his quirk. He definitely needed to get out here and start watching his back. Aizawa instantly snapped his eyes toward Kurogyri and shut the man down, who simply collapsed on the wooden floor, unable to move. He needed to quickly find his own way out, and fast. Who knows where these villains might send him, or what examining might mean. If the monster they sent after all might meant anything, then he did not want to stick around and find out. There were 2 points of entry, and Shigaraki firmly placed himself in front of the one that clearly would lead him outside. Taking in his peripheral, he saw a curtain leading toward the back. There had to be a back door. Jumping backward, he grabbed said curtain, ripping it from the rod, and flung it. Using the distraction, he made his way down a dark corridor. After him, the voice yelled. He won't be getting far. That way is just a dead end. There were many doors, and not one had any source of light peeking through the cracks. With this method proving to be ineffective, Aizawa began to try each door. If it were unlocked, he quickly shoved it open for a quick glance. So far, all the rooms were either empty, full of supplies, or simple bedrooms. Nothing of use to him, and whoever made the building had never heard of a window. He didn't have time to waste around. Kurogyri could appear from anywhere at any second. Hearing a sound, he whipped around and flashed his quirk, hoping that it would stall for time. Hopefully the mist that covered Kurogyri's body counted as his body and his quirk would work. This all began to feel like a horror movie that he did not want to be a part of and would like to find the end where he escapes the killer and sees another day. However, the last room he came to was his only hope, and it was locked. It was beginning to feel like he was going to have to fight his way out. Gearing up his quirk and capture weapon, he kicked down the door. His legs protested in the action and bit back his grunt. The only light source came from the hall light, but all he needed to know was that it was a dead end. A room of pitch darkness that did not have any discernible outlines. A small dark room, he hoped, led to a back alley where he could make a break for it. Despite the room not leading where he wanted didn't mean it wasn't empty. Due to the very little lighting from the corridor, Aizawa could make out a pair of red sneakers huddled in the corner. "Who's there?" Aizawa shouted. If there had been another villain, they would have attacked him by now. At the sound of his voice, those shoes quickly pulled away and hoped to be out of sight. A fear response. "Are you with them?" Aizawa patiently waited for an answer. He kept his guard up all around him, and it was really nagging at him. He didn't have too much time to waste with whoever this was, and the suspense and panic was starting to eat at him. However, he was a hero, and if this was someone in trouble, then he'd stay right where he was. "No," came a quiet yet young voice. A child. From the sounds of their tone, they were either just a preteen or just reaching being a teenager. At least they weren't very young. Younger children were often more difficult to handle with new quirks and not having the full comprehension of what was going on. Regardless, these villains were holding a child. Was he related to them? But then why keep him locked up? Were they going to use him as a new pet project? "What's your name, kid?" "Izuku Midoriya," said a green-haired boy that finally revealed himself from the shadows. A mess of green dirty curls and sunken green eyes looked up at him. Aizawa was lost for words. Bakugo was right. Bakugo seethed as the police were doing their head count. There was nothing he could do. If he left, they would surely drag him back, as the place was crawling with police and pro-heroes. Everything about the entire situation pissed him off. First, they attacked a bunch of high schoolers, which was shitty within itself. Then, the bastards got away. Even worse was that Aizawa got in his way and then ended up being hijacked by the villains to who knows where. "So how did you guys escape the shipwreck zone?" Uraraka asked Sue in the background. "It was actually really easy since I was able to jump to shore. The villains took themselves out after Shinso used his quirk," Sue explained. "Wow, you actually got to see him in action," Ashido said excitedly as she got close to the frog girl. "I did, and it was pretty handy because they weren't expecting," Sue said with a smile at the purple-haired boy. "And I would appreciate it if you kept it to yourself," Shinso commented as he just looked to the side distracted. "I understand, Ribbit," Sue answered. "He doesn't weigh much, so it wasn't difficult to get to shore, which is where we saw everything go down with Mr. Aizawa, All Might, and those villains." Even worse, apparently Eyebags and Frogger saw the whole thing as they were hiding out in the shallow waters. Of course, she couldn't keep her mouth shut when someone asked where their teacher was and told everyone what happened. After retelling how Bakugo rashly charged them as they made their escape, the rest of the class were glaring at him, blaming him for what happened. He got it all right. He fucked up, and now his teacher was paying the consequences. "Why do you have to be such a hothead, Bakugo? Now Mr. Aizawa is in some serious trouble," Hagakure said. "Oh, shut up. Stop making assumptions you don't know shit about," Bakugo yelled. "Will you take responsibility when Mr. Aizawa returns?" Ida said as he stared down Bakugo. Ida had enough with Bakugo's attitude. He didn't understand why Mr. Aizawa hadn't expelled him yet. He clearly wasn't cut out to be a hero and was here for a selfish reason, probably to take down villains and use his destructive quirk as much as he wanted. Once their teacher was back safe and sound, he would bring it up with him as a concerned party for the well-being and education of everyone in Class 1A. "Oh, you've been asking for it since day one, Four Eyes," Bakugo yelled, whipping around and stomping toward Ida. Forget anything else. He was wiping the floor with this asshat today, and there was no teacher around to stop him, especially using his quirk. Yes, he felt some guilt Mr. Aizawa was taken in his place, but he wasn't going to take this shit lying down. He wasn't some dog waiting to be told what to do until like this son of a bitch who sat with his tail and head held high waiting for a treat. Now, let's not be rash," Kirishima said, getting in front of Bakugo, stopping his path to assault. "What now you're on his side?" Ashido asked as she pouted her lips. What the heck? She knew her classmate from middle school was turning over a new leaf, but this was entirely different. Bakugo wasn't a person Kirishima would associate with. No way. Kirishima flashed her a smile. We got talking and I understand, that's all. Besides, Mr. Aizawa is a seasoned pro. Nothing's going to stop him. While that may be true, but Mr. Aizawa had some serious injuries and he was limited in how to use his quirk. Sue commented as she thought about the blood that ran down her teacher's face and arm. He was sacrificing everything to keep them safe. He did sacrifice himself, all because Bakugo had to get the last attack and couldn't let them go. We won't know anything until Mr. Aizawa returns. We'll just have to hope he's all right, Yaoyorozu said, stepping in with a calm voice. That still doesn't justify his actions, Ida yelled as he pointed at Bakugo, who only growled in response and attempted to step forward. Hey man, maybe you should tell them, Kirishima said concernedly as he placed a hand on his shoulder. Kirishima knew it wasn't his right to tell their classmates anything. He wasn't going to be unmanly and put Bakugo's past traumas and future endeavors out there without his say. Clearly the blonde was a private person and this was a private matter. He could understand where he was coming from though. Bakugo wanted to know where his friend was, and if those villains were there when it happened, then his rashness made sense. It wasn't the most rational choice, but it was one made out of compassion. I don't have to tell these extras shit, Bakugo yelled as he wrenched his shoulder away. He only told Kirishima because he was useful to him and he was open about it. The rest of these judging bastards wouldn't understand. You know them, don't you? Yaoyorozu said, straight-laced. Huh? Bakugo snapped. How the fuck did she know? This porcupine better not have told anyone or he'd roast him. By analyzing what happened, it's pretty obvious. You were the only one who showed no fear when we first encountered them. Now Kirishima has suddenly spoken for your defense. And what other reason would you have to go after them amidst their escape? Yaoyorozu concluded. Wow, really dude? You know them? Siro asked. Bakugo gritted his teeth. Damn this ponytail smartass, thinking she was so smart to have figured him out, and by the smug look on her face, she was gloating. Like he said, he didn't have to tell them shit. That leaves no right to act carelessly and allow others to take the fall, Ida added. Just shut up, leave me alone, and let me find him. Bakugo screamed as he panted harshly. He finally exploded. He couldn't take it anymore. He had heard it all before from people who did know. People who didn't care. People who said they were going to be heroes, but would leave someone behind and accept the loss. If these so-called heroes in training actually knew a thing or two, they'd think twice before opening their traps. Find who? Mr. Aizawa, Uraraka asked, confused. Bakugo finally got his breathing under control as he stared down each and every one of them. They each held curiosity in their eyes about what he had said. He was trapped. There wasn't any way out of this. Sure, he could ignore them, but they'd only further pester him about it. And what would happen when Mr. Aizawa returned? Their tired homeroom teacher wasn't going to be happy with him. No, he growled. Someone important to me was taken by those bastards, and you all can mind your own damn business and let me find him. Everyone shut up and looked shocked. Bakugo dared any of them to say something about it. Tell him he was dumb for risking so much to save one person who he didn't even know was alive. He'd blast them all to hell if he had to. He was alive, damn it. He had to be. Sorry to interrupt, students, but we have news on your teacher. A police officer with black hair and in a brown trench coat said as he walked up. Everyone turned expectantly, waiting to hear what he would say next. Was it solid intel, or was this just speculation? Was he found? Dead? Dying? Missing? He and another are being taken to the local hospital. Your teacher's going to be just fine. Bakugo's heart stopped as his thoughts echoed in disbelief. Aizawa was fine, and he had someone with him. Aizawa couldn't believe it. Izuku Midoriya was alive and right in front of him. After Bakugo revealed and knowing him, Aizawa noted what the boy looked like. Granted, the photograph he recovered was 6 years old, being an old-school photo, but it was clear this was Midoriya. Green curly hair, green eyes, freckles. However, that shine he saw in the photos was non-existent. You're Midoriya? Yes, Izuku said unsurely as he came farther out of the darkness into the light. We need to go, Aizawa said. He stepped forward to grab the boy. He would do whatever it took to get him out of here. This child already spent 6 years waiting for someone to come rescue him, and Aizawa refused to let him wait any longer. Also, he didn't know what the other two would do to him if they found out he had been located. These questions could wait until they were in safe hands, preferably at a hospital or UA, where they could be treated and protected. Are you injured? Aizawa asked. He'd carry the boy out if he had to, but that would certainly make things harder. Not really. Please leave me and get out. You're hurt and don't need someone like me weighing you down, Izuku said, eyeing the blood that dripped off his sleeve and coated his scarf. It wasn't what he said that threw Aizawa off. It was how he said it. He cared about Aizawa leaving. He accepted he wasn't going with him. What had these villains done to this child to make him shut down so fast at the thought of being saved? What happened to the little boy who saved Bakugo and his family? Where was the boy who risked his well-being to give Hitoshi, a boy he thought of like a nephew, a chance to escape unharmed? I won't leave you, but we need to go before those villains find out where we are, Aizawa said, reaching out to grab his arm. Izuku pulled away and scooted further back into the wall, trying to get as far away from the man as possible. You must know who I am, right, hero? I'm not a hero, Eraserhead. So he didn't know who he was. Good. This made it a lot easier. However, they were running out of time, and he would drag this kid out of this place, kicking and screaming if he had to. You know that's not true. But it's true. The boy answered in nothing louder than a whisper. No emotion as his eyes moved forward, looking into a void. Completely empty. Aizawa didn't want to admit the look in the kid's eyes was breaking through his cold exterior and interior. This is a kid who's been kicked down over and over again without any chance of getting back up. I killed all those people, and every time I tried to do the right thing, just ended up people dying or getting hurt. People I cared about are gone. I went along because you didn't want anyone to die, and that's exactly how a hero should think. You thought about the lives you could save in place of your own. How many people have died because of me? Just leave me here and save yourself. They want you for your quirk, and I can't let anyone else die because or for me. If that means staying here, then so be it. Midoriya has clearly accepted that his fate lies in staying in this room. The villains wanted him to stay here and be obedient. Aizawa bet money that when he found Hitoshi, Midoriya was still in the fight and flight stage where he was trying to get out on his own, but was unable to. It would be even harder if he was quirkless, but that fact was inconclusive in both stories. He was probably successful that day, but decided to save Hitoshi at the sacrifice of his own chance. The heart of that hero who was currently on its last ember, and there were two people couldn't wait to at least say thank you. Kid, you might not think you're a hero, but I know a couple of kids who think otherwise. Both in my class, and one of them would want nothing more than to see me return with you. An explosive blonde that you protected and lived. Izuku's eyes snapped up and looked at the pro. No way. He was sure that. He couldn't mean. Kaken. If that's what you call Bakugo kid, then yeah. Aizawa almost snorted at the cute nickname for Bakugo. That kid was anything but cute. He was a literal bomb with a short fuse. Maybe Bakugo wouldn't be the one to officially save Midoriya, but maybe he'd spur him forward to realize that being saved was still an option. There you are. A voice growled. I should have known you'd find each other. I was just going to let you leave here peacefully, but neither of you are going anywhere. The good doctor would like a chat with you, Eraserhead, and that kid is in for it. Aizawa's eyes widened as he went to whip around. He could feel the presence of a hand coming toward him, hearing the footfalls of running. It was too late to activate his quirk. Even if he did, by the time he actually got him in his sights, some damages would be done. He'd be injured, and then it would be next to impossible to escape with Midoriya. He refused to leave this hellhole without this child. A child who had been asking for help for so long, unable to reach out, and now he was in his grasp to save him. A frail hand reached out, and Aizawa panicked. What was this kid doing? Tears welled in his green eyes, and for an instant he saw a spark that wasn't there moments ago. Aizawa couldn't bear the thought of this kid dying in front of him. It would destroy him. It would destroy Bakugo. The kid's hand exploded. A blast of fire and smoke just erupted from the kid's hand right into Shigaraki's face. Shigaraki screamed as he grabbed his face, writhing in pain at the burn, and scrambled away as quickly as possible, screeching like a banshee. You stupid brat. I hate you. Sensei should just let me kill you. Shigaraki screamed. We need to get out of here, Aizawa said as he helped him up. Aizawa ignored how light he was. He was probably weighed as much as a child soaking wet. From what he could see, the boy was shaking, a clear sign of his unsteadiness on muscle he rarely put to use. Hold on, Izuku mumbled as he grabbed his sleeve. Kid, we don't have. Before Aizawa could finish his statement, Izuku turned around and placed his hand on the wall with all 5 fingers. From his hand, cracks appeared before growing out, and before his eyes the wall crumbled away, revealing another room. That was this villain's power. But moments before, he used a power similar to Bakugu's. Everything in the boy's files said he was quirkless. Was he not? Both Bakugu and Hitoshi mentioned that he used a quirk upon last seeing him. He could ask his questions about this later. Aizawa pulled Izuku along as they ran through the halls. Keeping his eyes open and his quirk prevented any nasty surprises from the warp villain, who was nowhere to be seen. Your quirk works through your eyes and allows you to stop the expression of the quirk gene, right? And it stops when you blink. Izuku asked as they went. That's right. Izuku then stopped and Aizawa almost yelled at him. His already defying hair stood straight up as his green eyes flashed red. Hirojiri, who appeared in front of them, stopped in his tracks, unable to move once more. Keeping his eyes trained on the warping villain, Izuku grabbed Aizawa and pulled him along. The halls all looked the same to Aizawa, but luckily the kid seemed to know where he was going. They took a small staircase before bursting through a door that led outside to an alleyway. That place was like a maze. No wonder he couldn't find his way out. Although the building shaded the area, it was still daylight, and at most he would have guessed he was missing only an hour or two. He looked to the boy to see him panting and couldn't find his breath. Made sense. They had run out there, and in his weakened state his body wasn't used to the exertion. We need to get away from here, and fast, Aizawa said, ready to pull Izuku along. Without a word, Izuku grabbed hold of Aizawa, and although the sentiment was nice, this wasn't the time for a hug. He was able to say something when his entire world shifted. He felt his entire body pulled at an instant. One moment he was standing in that alley, and now he was on top of a building he recognized was a few blocks over. He also felt like he was going to throw up and pressed his feet into the roof to stabilize himself. Eventually, his insides caught up with the rest of him, and he was able to get a good look at his surroundings. They were at that building somewhere in Kamino Ward in Yokohama. This was quite away from the school. Looking around, he didn't see any of the villains, so they were safe for the moment, so they could catch their breaths. Izuku was still hanging onto him tightly. His entire body was shaking. Aizawa couldn't help but hold on to him in hopes of calming both the kids and his nerves. He was probably in shock, unable to believe what was happening. He still couldn't believe it himself. Bakugo was right. Aizawa felt relief washed over him, as this was an ending he hoped for. The school year was starting to be something else he never imagined. What started as confronting some traumatized, angsty teen transformed into saving someone no one believed needing saving. Actually, Izuku saved him. He never would have gotten out without him. Hopefully after this the kid could have some semblance of a normal life with someone to watch over him. Bakugo and Hitoshi would certainly do so, and Aizawa would too, being invested in this child. He would need help to get back to being healthy in mind and body, but it was all in due time. Hopefully along the way they could spark that heart in him again that burned for a brief moment. Izuku Midoriya was still alive, and so was his heart at wanting to be a hero. You did great, kid. You got us out, Aizawa said before taking a step back to finally make sure the boy was all right for the moment. Now that he got a good look at the boy, he was pale, awfully skinny. His breathing was shallow and labored, and despite his resolve, he couldn't seem to stay on his feet as he swayed. The shakes in his form hadn't calmed in the slightest, despite the adrenaline should be wearing off by now. If anything, they were getting worse, and the kid looked like he was going to be sick. Thank you, but I think I overdid it. What? Midoriya. Aizawa only had a split second before Izuku collapsed into his chest. Easily lifting the boy into his arms, he ignored the pain and took note of etched pain in his face as his boy shook. They both needed to get to a hospital fast. Chapter 6. Bakugo thought the entire situation was bullshit. Once the detective had told them Aizawa and someone else had been recovered, he instantly interrogated anyone he could track down, but no one would tell him who Aizawa found or what hospital they were taken to. He could definitely use context clues and figure it out, but he didn't have time to make guesses. They were just lackeys who didn't know or simply told him it wasn't for a child like him to worry about and that he could ask his teacher later. Fuck later. As much as Bakugo hoped, it couldn't be Izuku. No way. That was wishful thinking, and he couldn't get his hopes up to have it crushed. Even with all the new information he gained since starting high school, Bakugo still had a creeping doubt in the back of his mind that Izuku was actually still alive. Knowing Aizawa, he probably captured one of the villains, taking him in for questions with probably a couple of injuries needing tended to. He hoped one of those fuckers had a broken nose or something. Serve them right. However, whoever this was could point him in the right direction to where he could get his answers. All right, little listeners, we'll get you all back to campus. Recovery Girl isn't there right now, so someone else is going to give you all a super quick check to make sure you're all doing a-okay. Afterward, we'll make sure you get home safe and sound. You dig? Present Mike announced as he pointed them toward the bus where the class started filing onto. Hitoshi held back a moment before going up to his guardian. Already the blonde had looked the boy over head to toe to make sure he was all right. Hitoshi wanted to complain, but wouldn't because that would just make the voice hero sad, and he couldn't hold up to his pouting face. The man needed to make sure he was all right, as he already pictured him going crazy thinking that something could have happened to him. He could humor the man. Is he all right? Hitoshi asked about Aizawa. Sure is. Spoke to him and everything. Hisashi answered with a smile. Actually, I'm supposed to grab you and explode why to come with me. Aizawa said he wanted to talk to you both in person. Bakugo glared at the name and rolled his eyes before walking over so they could leave. He wouldn't admit that this made him a little apprehensive. Aizawa probably wanted to chew him out then and not wait until they got back to class. The best case scenario was that this wasn't even about the USJ, and this might be a lead on Izuku. Aizawa knew how much this mattered to him. Bakugo knew it would be too good to be true for him to be found. Plus, he was the one who was going to save Izuku. He was the one who was going to bring him home. He promised at his aunt's funeral as they lowered her casket that he was going to save her son and always watch out for him. That was all he would accept to do, nothing less. I do hope when seeing Mr. Aizawa, you'll apologize for your actions. Ida interrupted their walk toward the unmarked car. He stared Bakugo down. The boy needed to see how his actions had consequences, and someone could have died. As class rep, it was his responsibility to help his classmates, and this boy had been anything but helpful since they started class all not that long ago. Their teacher could have died saving him because he was unable to think rationally in a time of crisis. How would that even transfer in being a hero? Everyone prepared for Bakugo to turn around and blast the speedster. It was a coin toss on whether or not he'd actually do it with so many teachers and police officers around. They at least noticed despite the gruff attitude. Bakugo at least respected authority to a degree. Even though their homeroom teacher wasn't there didn't mean the others would overlook his behavior and would say something to Aizawa when he returned. However, surprising everyone, Bakugo turned around with the calmest, yet pissed-off face they'd seen him with. His red eyes bore into Ida's. Do you have someone you care about? Someone that you'd do anything to see to it that they were safe? Think about seeing them gone before your eyes as you were powerless to do anything, but watch them go knowing the fact you might not ever see them again, and then live with that feeling that you just weren't enough. Bakugo said in a low tone. He was done fighting with this asshole and hoped that hitting him where it hurt would finally remove that stick. After not immediately receiving an answer, Bakugo snorted and walked away. Ida thought about Bakugo's words as they hit home. Of course, there were plenty of people he cared about and wanted to keep safe. His family. His elder brother was the main one. His elder brother was his hero, and he would look up to him every day and follow his example in order to make him proud. Now, even before being elected class rep, he vowed he would look out for his classmates. Each one of them was invaluable. Bakugo was his classmate too. Even though he was brash, Bakugo just admitted that his goals in becoming a hero were for the sake of someone else. The boy had no justification to lie, and Kirishima seemed like a model student wouldn't go out of his way to defend someone who didn't deserve it. If this person was important to Bakugo, his classmate, then as class rep and a future hero, he was important to him too. Ida went to respond to the boy, but saw that he had already gotten in the car done with the conversation and left him with his thoughts about what he realized. Hitoshi sighed and looked over to Bakugo, who was staring out the window. He had a lot to say to the other boy, but couldn't find the right words. He didn't want to piss the boy off, but Hitoshi wanted to make his opinion known to the other boy. He wasn't pleased. I was going to give you a hard time. Eraserhead is best friends with my guardian, and he's been like an uncle to me. Always been in my corner and gave me more chances than I deserve. When I saw what happened, I was furious. Then I thought about it after hearing everything you and others said. Midoriya is important to you, and well, I wouldn't be here without him either. Just stop being stupid, okay? He'll get saved. We might not know when, but you and I know he's alive. Bakugo snorted, although he appreciated the words, before he asked, "Who the fuck is your guardian?" "Me." Hisashi cheered from up front with his eyes straight forward on the road. Bakugo's mouth dropped a little looking between the two. He didn't fucking believe it. It had to be a joke. There was no way Ibags Jr. and Max Volume No Mute were a family. They were just so different. He guessed opposites really did attract. He's not joking. Midoriya sent me to his radio station. Bakugo shook his head with a slight eye roll. Of course the fucking nerd would know the address of the DJ Heroes radio station. Probably to send fan mail all the time and ask a zillion questions about Quirk and hero work. Most likely Present Mike didn't care and ate that shit up. "I guess you want to know?" Bakugo asked. "About how I know Izuku." He wasn't dumb. If they hadn't been interrupted the other day, he could see it in the purple-haired boy's eyes that he was curious. "I'm curious," Hitoshi said. Bakugo sighed. This was going to the longest, shortest fucking ride ever. Aizawa was lucky enough to find a phone and called Nizu immediately. In case of emergencies, the rat made sure his entire staff had his personal number memorized. Now he saw the fruits of the logic behind it. The person who he was borrowing it from was flabbergasted at the sight of them and helped immediately. The principal was surprised to get an unknown number being Aizawa saying he had escaped his supposed capture, that was in Kamino, and needed aid for him and a child he recovered. Said child was panting and shaking furiously as his freckled cheeks were slowly becoming red in his throbbing arms. "Oh, Izuku Midoriya," the rat said with glee, and Aizawa bit back a groan. "I may have been listening to several conversations about our young friend, and I couldn't believe you kept that exquisite notebook from me hidden away in that dusty desk of yours. I do hope to see more in the future. But enough of that. We need to get you back here safely and pronto." Damn it. He was hoping to give it back before the principal found it. No matter. Too late now. And Aizawa wouldn't let the principal near the boy until he was well taken care of. Thankfully, the principal was able to get across to the right people and was able to get them transferred directly to the hospital near UA in no time at all. Izuku was admitted into the hero ward and would be guarded by a pro at all times that Aizawa stated to everyone that would be hand-picked by either himself or Nizu. Hell, Aizawa argued that he'd be the only one allowed to stay with him, but his own injuries protested the idea. He'd be useless if anyone would come after him. With this league of villains having kept Izuku alive for 6 years, he bet they weren't keen in letting him go so easily. A hospital stay would be easy to handle as most high-profile patients were often asked to be guarded, but that didn't mean anything whenever Izuku was allowed to leave. Luckily, the principal was a creepy mind reader and was already working on the after-hospital stay while he put up with the old lady who insisted on healing him. He might have gotten hit in the shin with her cane for telling her no and to just wrap him up. She made a good point anyway, as he wasn't allowed to see the boy. The boy wasn't allowed visitors until they deemed him safe and was currently in isolation in fear he had something contagious. They needed to combat the sudden fever that started on the way to the hospital. Aizawa held him the entire trip despite protest from the paramedics. He couldn't let him go even as he watched his labored breathing and fits of uneasiness. He was barely conscious as his bleary eyes were trained on Aizawa's, never leaving until they reached the hospital and the kid finally passed out. Over the course of the ride, he whispered to the boy reassurances and called him by his given name in hopes to soothe him. Through the updates he requested, it seemed the boy seemed to be getting better after some time on his own, but still had yet to awaken. It was strange. One minute Aizawa worried he was going to die before getting him to safety. The next he was looking at the boy he met in that room. However, the exhaustion in his face said it all as someone who appeared to have just gotten over an illness. At least that was good news. He was right when the boy was underweight, and other findings showed he was malnourished and had several scars littering his body. Some looked recent while others were at least a couple years old. Luckily, despite those, he seemed fine and would just need to put on some weight and muscle mass. A good meal plan and physical therapy would do the trick. The bad news that Aizawa was avoiding until the boy was able to speak and think clearly was his mental health. Already from talking to him, he could tell he was going to need help mentally. 6 years was a long time to be held captive by villains, and only he fully knows what they put him through. Aizawa guessed he'd have to wait until. The sounds of yelling and blaring alarms alerted the tired man. Ignoring the pains throughout his body and calling to his capture weapon that laid on the table, he raced out of the room to see a couple of nurses and a doctor in face masks rush into a room near his. Thankfully, this meant it wasn't villains. Getting to the doorway in a record sprint, he was able to get a glimpse in to see Midoriya struggling and panicking as his face looked flushed again. He sucked in a breath and attempted to enter only to be stopped by a nurse. "Sir, you can't go in there," she cried. "We don't know what he has." "Like hell, and I'm most likely already infected if it is anything," Aizawa growled. "He's been in captivity for years and needs a familiar face." Without waiting for a reply, he pushed his way in and past the people who were forcibly trying to hold him down. For as weak as the kid might have been, he was putting up a decent fight, shoving off orderlies, nurses, and doctors who were all taking turns to hold him down. Dare he think he saw the boy's hand start to light up. "Stop. Please. No more. I can't." Aizawa stopped a moment at hearing the child's pleas. Clearly, he wasn't talking to the doctors and nurses. He was talking to the demons lurking inside his head, most likely flashbacks. "We're going to have to sedate him," a doctor yelled. "Izuku." Aizawa tried, but seemed to fall deaf ears. He pushed his way past the medical staff who seemed appalled that he was even there getting in the way. He gently sent out his weapon that intertwined with the boy's fingers. Almost instantly the boy stopped, and the only sound in the room was his heavy breathing. "Air." His voice died. "Izuku, are you okay?" Aizawa asked gently. Green eyes snapped open and looked at the man. A new panic was in his eyes from what he had seen earlier. This was a fear he saw in some cases where people with traumas of doctors. Aizawa hated that pieces were beginning to fold together, remembering the description of the man Hitoshi described. "Can I touch you?" "Only you," Izuku said, reaching out his hand hoping the hero would reciprocate. Taking back his scarf, Aizawa gently held the boy's hand and brushed his fingers across his wrist. Aizawa could feel through his pulse point his heart beating so fast he was worried it might explode. His hands were shaking again, and it seemed like he just wanted something to grab onto. Gently lifting his hand, he brought it to his chest and allowed the boy to grasp the weapon while leaning on his chest. "It's all right. Follow my heartbeat and breathing." Now that the kid realized he was no longer in danger and Aizawa, a hero he hoped he could trust, was there, the dam broke. The kid sobbed fat tears that were only accompanied by silence as he opened his mouth, having gone hoarse. Izuku wavered, and Aizawa gently guided the curly head in his chest where he nuzzled and shook his head. Aizawa wasn't sure what the kid was saying no to, but he ran his fingers through his hair to convey that it was okay. Izuku didn't need words right now. His costume becoming soaked was a small price to pay to comfort the boy. Eventually his breathing evened out, and it hurt his heart knowing it was because he passed out. Aizawa hated leaving Izuku alone, and as he untangled himself from him, he became fitful again. After passing out, he held the boy for a good 20 minutes until Recovery Girl arrived back from viewing test results. She swiftly kicked the previous staff and put herself as Izuku's primary provider. Anything regarding his health had to go through her, and there would be hell to pay if not. Aizawa thought it best to leave his capture weapon with the boy. It seemed to have worked for the most part as he curled up with it and calmed back down to go back to sleep. Hopefully, it would give him a sense of security that Aizawa would return and he was safe for the moment. The conversation and panicked question he needed Chio for needed to not be heard by prying ears, especially his. Yes, it considered his health, but he didn't need to overhear it and deserved to be talked to like a human being. Regardless, he was still running a fever and would need all the rest he could get. Chio reassured him that he wasn't ill, and this wasn't something an outside source caused. "So, do you know what's wrong?" Aizawa asked as they entered the waiting room down the hall. "He's awfully underweight for his age, but you already knew that. However, I only have a theory of what brought on this fever of his. You said he progressively got worse as and after you escaped?" "Yes. It wasn't until we were outside and away from the base that he collapsed. What do you think it is?" "I only have records from 6 years ago, and they say the boy is quirkless, but I assume that's incorrect." "Yes. I saw him use multiple different quirks," Aizawa confirmed. He didn't think he was going to forget that anytime soon. Whatever quirk this was had saved his skin. Within what was like 10 minutes, he saw Izuku use Bakugu's, Shigaraki's, his own, and some other unidentified quirk, so no, the boy wasn't quirkless. Far from it. So either that boy wasn't actually quirkless or something caused one to manifest. I have a source that says it manifested before his capture, and that was 6 years ago, Aizawa said. Then my theory is holding up, Chio said, noting something. Chio, just be straight with me. Is the boy dying? Aizawa asked right out as he was beginning to slightly lose patience. He had to know and needed it to not be sugar-coated. If Izuku was going to die, he needed to change how his recovery was going to be handled. He had a plan in place, and the initial step was happening either way. Depending on her answer would change what they would do after. Shoyuta also didn't want to think about getting attached. He just met the kid for the first, and he's already wormed his way into his heart without them meeting face to face. He was a fighter. He was heroic. Aizawa didn't think he could handle watching him die. Not after everything he's done to help people and all they've been looking out for him. His white blood cell count is up and is slowly coming back down. He only got that way after he was seen using his quirk. I'm willing to guess his body isn't used to his quirk, and every time he uses it his body sees it as an infection. I won't know for sure until I can talk to him and know what his quirk is. Until then, the best option is to just not use it, and he'd be like anyone else. But this may be a case where his body needs to get used to it or find a counter to it. But no, Aizawa, the boy isn't going to die. Aizawa let out a breath of relief. Good. So far Izuku was predicted to be able to live not on borrowed time. Like the nurse, he was curious about how the boy's quirk worked, especially if this is the reaction. From what he could see, it may work similar to the boy that was in 1B. They wouldn't worry about it for right now. Chio said as long as he didn't use it for the moment he'd recover. Aizawa, your phone. The old lady's voice cut in. Allowing him to take it privately, she left with the intention to check up on the boy and see who else she could assist while she was there. She was thankful that the grumpy teacher had made it out as well as he did. When she first heard Aizawa had been injured and unintentionally taken by villains, she worried that he wouldn't be returning to them in one piece. After receiving the call from Mizu that Aizawa and this boy, who looked like such a sweet child, were coming home, she said she'd be there to do all she could. Oh, Aizawa said, picking up his cell that the nurse so graciously brought with her when she came to help them. The caller ID, said Sakachi. The detective worked fast, and he better say what he wanted to hear. The hospital seemed as normal as it would on a weekday. Many people flowed in and out the doors for appointments and waited to be seen. However, the two students couldn't help notice that there were a couple more pros in the main area than there normally would be. The hospital had one or two that stopped in during patrols to check out the area, but they looked on guard and were not going anywhere anytime soon. Hisashi brought them up to the hero ward that was located near the top floor. If they thought the lobby had a few more pros than normal, then this floor was flooded. Of course, there were the ones who were there for their own injuries, but as soon as they entered the wing, all eyes were on them, staring them down. Hisashi flashed a smile and his license before shouting that the kids were with him, and it was all good before taking them into the waiting area. Hey Aizawa, I brought them, Hisashi said as they entered. Aizawa whipped around and flashed his quirk to silence the man while motioning he was on the phone. Hisashi had oops written all over his face, and Hitoshi snorted. This wasn't the first time the older loud blonde had done that and gotten that red icy glare. Aizawa then winced as he rubbed his eyes. Both students took in their homeroom teacher. He looked better than they expected except for the bandages around his arm and smaller ones on his face. Then it's all in order, Aizawa confirmed before going quiet to listen to the other side. Yes, this is the best option, and honestly, it's the only option I'm allowing. I'll finalize the rest of the plan with the principal as he's in full agreement and let you know. Thank you. Aizawa clicked his cell before sliding it back in his pocket. He then sighed before turning toward the three. His eyes trained on his two students. Are you okay? Hitoshi asked, breaking the silence and tension. Yes, actually. The damage was partially healed by Recovery Girl when I arrived, and she'll finish later at a better time. I'll have some scars, but nothing to be concerned about. More important matters came up that I needed to see through before anything else. What happened, man? Hisashi asked. I'll tell you later, Aizawa answered. He considered not even telling him since Hitoshi lived with him. The raven-haired man was well aware that the blonde could not, unless his life depended on it, keep a secret, especially from his kid. I'm sorry to have called you down here, but I don't think it's a good time. What the hell? Bakuga screamed. Why bring us here then tell us to go home? What's the meaning of this? Bakugu, you are in a hospital. Quiet down. Aizawa scolded. I shouldn't even allow you here at all after the stunt you pulled. Bakugu instantly backed down and closed his mouth tightly shut. His teacher was right, and begrudgingly, so was Four Eyes. Bakugu deduced that emotions are shit, and apparently, when they get out of control, it causes mistakes that in this career could cost a hero or civilian their life. He doesn't even know what happened while Aizawa was with the villains. Clearly, the man was no more injured than when he left the USJ, so that was a positive. Also, the man wouldn't have brought children here if it were a villain he dragged back. I'm only telling you now because I understand you have a right to know. I know the burdens you feel and the guilt you carry, and that's why I asked you to come down here. But please understand that it isn't a good time now, and it has to be when he's ready. If you fight me on this, I will not allow visitations, and I will take corrective action if you defy that. Aizawa explained in one of the most serious tones they each have ever heard, and Aizawa took a moment to look each of them in the eyes. Bakugu. Hitoshi. I found him. Like a punch to the gut, the air was knocked out of both boys, and they almost collapsed from the shock. Their eyes widened as they couldn't believe it. By the look on his face that showed gentleness and relief, there was only one person he could mean. Izuku. Tamura looked at the destruction that kid caused. Walls destroyed, and the perfect hiding place was now on the map for the heroes to find. No doubt they would have to move hideouts because Eraserhead knew where they were located, and the stupid brat destroyed everything he got his hands on. Master should have just allowed him to kill him a couple years ago, but the old man must have either gotten soft or had some sick, twisted reason to keep him. He was useless to their goals anyway, so what was the point? All he remembered was a few years ago him dropping the brat off, telling Tamura and Kurogiri to keep an eye on him, don't kill him, and don't let him escape. Tamura tried to be a good host, but the kid wasn't having it. Apparently, he was just some quest prize to be kept in a vault for safekeeping. Tamura. What happened? A deep voice hissed through the television. Tamura gulped as he recognized that tone, which was when his master was truly angry. Only being on the receiving end a couple times reminded him to never defy him and his wishes. I'm sorry, Master. Eraserhead tagged along after our failure of a raid and found the brat. They were able to escape. We're going to have to move our base after this one was perfect. It's all the brat's fault. You should have just dealt away with him when. Tamura. The room got quiet as the stern voice echoed, cutting off the rant. Tamura hated it when it got quiet. It always meant trouble. He is mine. Find him, Tamura. I want him back and will not accept failure as an option. Once he's in your hands, contact me. Do not harm him. Yes, Master, Tamura said as he bowed. Although his master couldn't see him, he didn't want to risk him seeing the look of rage etched into his face. As much as he wanted to watch his skin decay away and him drown in his blood, the master said not to harm him. However, he grinned as sickening and evil thoughts came to mind. Master made it seem like he couldn't harm him. He said nothing about anyone else that he employed to capture the brat. Why should that brat be the most important thing? He would suffer in taking away his master's attention and time. Chapter 7. Everything felt fuzzy, yet a comforting warmth enveloped him. It made him think about his mom and the way she'd hold him tightly as she cheerfully thanked him for saving her as they played. He remembered him as All Might while he used his super strength to lift the building off her. Granted, it was a bed sheet, but in that moment he could move anything to get to her. He'd scream, empowering, I am here, and his mom always said she knew she'd be safe because he was there. It wasn't like when he tried to use those memories to keep going. They weren't cold or empty placeholders that left him alone. Something was wrong. He should be alone. However, the soft weight wrapped around his chest, neck, and head felt like someone's arms around him. Not like his mother's, but a strong presence that made him feel safe instead of the other way around. He slowly opened his eyes, and the sun that had yet dimmed greeted him to today and the freedom that would come with it. It was too bright. The smell of antiseptics and the sounds of the beeping heart monitor shouldn't be accompanied by the light. There was only darkness and pain. This was a nightmare. This wasn't real. He didn't want that. He couldn't want that. He didn't deserve that. You found him? Shinso asked in disbelief, finally getting his voice back. Shinso couldn't believe it and almost had to sit down. He didn't bother to spare a glance at Bakugo except for noting that for once he was quiet. When he told Yamada and Aizawa about the boy who saved him, they couldn't do as much as he liked. There was no trace of the boy, and the cameras in the area had been wiped. As pros, they had some pull, but his statement meant nothing if they didn't have any evidence, and everyone just said he was just a lost, frantic child, that he had made him up and able to help himself. Oh, how Shinso would love to go back to those people and yell at them for not believing. Shinso was relieved to know Midoriya had been saved. A weight that long sat on his chest, suffocating him, was finally lifted. Yes, while trying to escape the facility I was transported to, I came across a locked room where I found him. We were able to escape thanks to him. Although in better health than we imagined, he does have a lot of recovery ahead. I don't mean just his physical health, mentally too. We don't know what they've done to him. Shinso nodded. That made sense. As much as he wanted to know about Midoriya and about that day, he couldn't rush it. He could set him back, or worse, completely shut him down. He'd wait until he was told he could be reintroduced to him. That was, even if he remembered him. Shinso doubted that Midoriya would remember anything from then. Damn it! Bakugo cursed as he gritted his teeth and clenched his fist. His red eyes started to blur as he stared at the floor. He was so fucking pissed. An intense feeling welled up, and it was ugly, and it hurt so much. Hey listener, it's a good thing. Yamada cheered to Bakugo, giving him a pat on the shoulder. Shut your damn mouth. Bakugo snapped as he pushed off the blonde. Bakugo trembled as he closed his eyes. His breaths came out sharp and deep. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. How was he supposed to face them now? Any of them? His parents? Inko? Izuku? What's going through your mind? Aizawa asked. He wasn't regretful that all this happened in the span of like a week, but he had hoped Bakugo had started his sessions before he was forced to confront anything else he bottled up. Hound Dog would have given him ways to safely express himself and calm himself from panics or anger when those emotions blew the cap. Bakugo's voice answered with anger, and his words seemed choppy as he tried to bite through it like he had done in the teacher's lounge. I was supposed to find him. I was supposed to save him. Bring him home like I promised. Despite what anyone else might believe hearing that, Aizawa knew this wasn't jealousy talking. This was pent-up regret that he only thought could be erased by saving Izuku himself. He needed, to save Izuku himself. He wasn't mad that he saved Izuku. He was pissed that he wasn't the one to do it. You may not have been the one to rescue him, but he still needs saving. He's going to need a friend by his side to let him know everything will be all right. Can you do that? Aizawa asked gently. I want to see him, Bakugo demanded as he snapped his head up toward him. Aizawa sighed as Bakugo didn't answer his question and ignored what he said earlier. Hopefully the boy heard him. Bakugo, I understand, but... Aizawa was interrupted by the door to the waiting room slamming open and a rather haggard, panting nurse rushed in. Panic rushed through Aizawa. Oh no, he wasn't gone for more than an hour. The only thing he could think was that Izuku had woken up and didn't find anyone he was comfortable with. Erase your head, sir. He needs you. Stay here, Aizawa growled before running out to follow her. The nurse led him down the hall. Thankfully, he didn't hear any screaming, and all seemed calm for that moment as he reached the room. Recovery Girl came out with a solemn expression. Aizawa feared that wasn't good news. He hoped that they could talk to Izuku before tomorrow. So many important questions needed answers. But as much as the pro-hero in him wanted those answers, logically, he knew he needed to take his time. Is he okay? Aizawa asked. For right now, yes. He had another panic attack upon waking up. I've given him a small sedative that should calm his nerves, but he's still awake and coherent. I'd say the most he's been since arriving, as his fever has finally come down. I was hoping that with this he can answer some questions if he's up to it, but I'll leave that to him to decide. As his doctor, I need to know why he was in such a bad way. I can't treat him based on what I think. Recovery Girl answered as she looked into his charts. Aizawa nodded. This wasn't going to be easy. Despite being on a sedative, Aizawa didn't feel quite right unless he was able to answer in full mind and body, but Recovery Girl was right. He never wanted to see Izuku like that again. Helplessly in his arms as he was unable to help as this kid, who he admittedly got attached too quickly to, and that saved his life, seemingly fated. Steeling himself, he walked in to see Izuku had his capture weapon in his lap with his hands clenched tightly around it. "Hey kid, are you doing okay now?" Aizawa asked softly as he stayed far enough back to give Izuku some space. Izuku was still shaking as he took deep breaths. His eyes opened and closed slowly, rather lethargically. He was so tired, but couldn't sleep, wouldn't sleep. He couldn't be here. Not with all these people here. They could get hurt. They could die. He shook his head back and forth as his eyes turned glassy. No, 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 no. "Izuku, what's wrong?" Aizawa asked, seeing the boy start to tear up and shake his head and taking a couple tentative steps forward. "Why you shouldn't have B brought me here. They're just going to come after me, and P put you all in danger," Izuku said as he looked down as those tears started to slowly leak out. "I meant what I said, kid. I wasn't going to leave you there. Not when you don't belong there, and there are people here that care about your well-being. You may not think you deserve it, but we'll work on that. You'll one day see your life is just as important and want to live it how you want." Aizawa reassured him as he put a hand on his head. Izuku seemed to have calmed down and leaned into the touch. Poor kid. Probably touch-starved, and the fact he knew Aizawa wasn't going to hurt him made it easier to accept than give into his fear. He then sighed. "I know it might seem like a lot, but are you up to answering some questions? Just some basic ones so we can understand how to protect and help you." "Yeah, I guess that would be okay." Izuku sniffed. "Thank you, Izuku. You're being brave right now. Now, Recovery Girl would like to know more about your quirk. She seems under the belief that it affects your health, so if you know anything about it, that could help her." Izuku went quiet as his eyes peered down the floor. His quirk. When it finally showed itself at 10, he didn't think this would be the cost. Knowing what he does now, he kind of wished he remained quirkless. He was so conflicted about his quirk. While being labeled quirkless, he longed to have one just like everyone else. A strong one that he could use to help save people with a smile and defeat villains. He thought his quirk was all that a future hero could have or want. Perfect for a hero who wasn't him. It could help so many types of people in various different ways, but it was also the reason for so much pain and suffering. It was the whole reason he was in his mess in the first place. If he didn't have this quirk, then none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have been kidnapped. Although Kaken was alive, he was probably so mad at him. His mom. "Please, dear. You were in a bad way when you got here, and I hate to see you that way again if I can help it. Yes, you seem to have recovered on your own, but what if next time you're not so lucky?" Recovery Girl encouraged him as it brought him out of his thoughts. She smiled sweetly at the boy, glad her voice was able to calm the race of thoughts and the building panic. "Take your time. Whatever it is, we just want to help you. There is nothing wrong with that," Aizawa said softly. Izuku's eyes looked like they were gathering his thoughts, trying to find a good place to start. Yeah, he liked his quirk as it fed his love for quirks and for how versatile it was, but all the bad memories and events attached to it made it hard to accept that fact. Looking at the youthful heroine and the eraser hero, he took a breath. "I didn't think I had one until that night. Apparently the toe joint is a genetic trait I got from my father's side, and I probably got my quirk when everyone else got theirs. But since mine works in a specific way, I didn't know. They gave it all sorts of weird names like Master Code and all for knowing, but I like the name I gave it. I call it derivative. It allows me to essentially use another person's quirk as long as I know how it fundamentally works. Like Kaken's quirk factor is found in his hands and works because he can ignite the nitroglycerin sweat from his palms. The doctor who looked into my quirk said it was fascinating, and I don't understand why he was so obsessed. The few quirks I know how to use are all emitters. I don't really want to try and risk a mutation, but transformative should be all right." Izuku rambled in a low voice. Aizawa gave a small smile that quickly vanished before anyone could see it, especially that nosy and chatty nurse. She'd never let him live it down. From reading his notes, this kid seemed like he rambled a lot, and he was right. He was pleased to know that part of him hadn't been snuffed out. Maybe all who Izuku wasn't completely lost that night, and Aizawa might be able to truly save him. Derivative, a math term meaning something originating from, based on, or influenced by something else. Or, as ectoplasm would tell him, the rate of change of a function with respect to a variable. It made sense from what he was hearing. Izuku's quirk depended on what variables he influenced on it. Such variables being what he knows about the quirk he's wanting to replicate. Aizawa was curious at what he could actually do with some training. Could he create new quirks if everything added up, or maybe even combine them? Could he use multiple at once? That sounds impressive, Aizawa said. Aizawa always did say quirks were simply tools one used to get the job done, and this kid had access to every tool imaginable. It's not. Izuku shook his head. That's why he took me. He wanted my quirk. He wanted me to be like him and dash. Hey, it's okay. We're getting off track. We can talk about that later when you're ready. Does your quirk affect your health? Aizawa settled him down by grabbing his hand. Izuku took a deep, calming breath. Like most quirks, they come with side effects. Because my quirk changes what my quirk factor, or quirk gene, does throughout my entire body, it forces me to do something I wasn't able to before, acting like I'm actually quirkless, so I have to get used to the quirks I use. I'm mutating my entire being to use it until I turn it off. I'm not copying it for a limited time, as once I learn how the quirk works, I don't need to learn it again to use it, as it gets added to like an internal database, where I only have to think about it. I can only use one quirk at a time and I have a reset time of a minute. But if I use it too much in a small amount of time, well, you saw what happened. When I use it too much at one time, I get sick because my body can't handle the stress. I'm not sure why it does this now. It didn't used to. Recovery Girl wrote this all down in his chart as he explained. This was exacting what she needed to know to create a plan to help him combat any ill effects. While she was at it, she'd update his quirk registry and tell Nizu to bury the kid's file in firewalls. They didn't need people snooping and getting any ideas that apparently weren't thought of already. Good job, dear. Thank you so much for telling me. Here, have some of these. Recovery Girl said as she gave him some sweets. Aizawa almost laughed at the small, dumbfounded look on Izuku's face. Cautiously, the kid brought a gumi to mouth before hesitantly eating it. Sweet kid, as he noted, he actually didn't want to eat it, but did so anyone so wouldn't make the older nurse sad. It appears I wasn't too far off in my theory. For right now, we'll focus on your physical health, and once we're at where I'm satisfied, we'll look into quirk counseling. Do not use your quirk recklessly again. Do you understand me, young man? I understand this time was necessary, but I can't know for sure how much your body can take. I don't see why you can't be released soon as long as you stick to the meal plan given. I'll go check on a few things, and we'll chat again soon. Recovery Girl gave him a small smile before walking out, leaving the two alone in silence. As soon as she was gone, Izuku put the extra gummies on the nightstand. They were good, but he didn't think he could stomach them right now. Aizawa had other questions to ask, but thought it best to wait and even encourage Izuku to ask his own. He had to have some. Izuku's eyes darted back and forth. He looked expectantly at the hero with inquiring eyes, and if Aizawa's own ever graced him, they found another place in the room more interesting, refusing to make contact. So he was right. You want to ask something? Aizawa asked. Izuku swallowed. Can I? Sure, Aizawa answered. Innocently enough, the kid should be given the right, and if he was this nervous about it, then Aizawa noted that he would work. My mom, is she? Aizawa took a hard swallow. He didn't need to ask any clarifying questions. Izuku already knew, but it still pained Aizawa to say it. Yeah, kid. I'm sorry. Although he already cried for his mother once he was alone, this was the first time he cried when people wouldn't scream or threaten him. Izuku just let it out and sobbed fat tears for the first time in years. A lingering hope flickered that maybe she survived, but he knew it was false, and this just confirmed it. He saw the light leave her eyes. He saw the amount of blood on the floor. Something someone doesn't want to hear, but it had to be said. Aizawa simply put a hand on his head for comfort as the kid cried. He jumped when he felt hands grab at him, but got the message to lean down. Izuku instantly latched on for the hug he desperately craved. Softly, he soothed him as caressed his back as those sobs eventually turned into hiccups. Needing to continue this conversation about what was next, Aizawa went to release the boy, but he had other plans and held on for dear life. He guessed he didn't have to see him to continue. We've looked into your family and can't find anyone. Your mother was only child whose parents have passed. Do you happen to know anything about your father? Izuku went rigid and sucked in a deep, uneasy breath. His files didn't say much about his father except a Hisashi Midoriya on the birth certificate. A man of mystery who he couldn't find any other information on. The man who took me. He was my father. Izuku said in a soft voice that was laced with fear as his arms got tighter. Oh shit, Aizawa thought as he sourly thought that answered one of his other questions. Bakugo might have known about who had taken Izuku, but at the time Izuku wasn't on his radar. He didn't entirely believe the kid was alive. Aizawa was more worried about the one who was currently in front of him in his class. Bakugo, from self-destructing. Well, that just made things complicated, and he cursed the universe to give this kid a fucking break. Where will I go now? Izuku asked. We've gone over different options, and we think it best for you to come stay with me. Izuku let go and moved back looking at the hero in surprise. With you? Yeah, kid. For right now you'll come home with me. Is that okay? Aizawa asked. Kaken, Izuku said looking past him in a voice of belief. What did Bakugo have to do? Aizawa turned around and cursed. Looking in the window, where the blinds weren't down, was a spiky blonde child with red eyes that shook in elation named Bakugo who didn't know how to fucking listen to directions. Aizawa hated that the anger he felt seeing his students' eyes light up quelled his anger to not lose it. He had never seen the angry kid look so calm and full of positive emotions. The fat tears were back as Izuku began sobbing again, which spurred Bakugo into action as he rushed in. Bakugo, Aizawa yelled, cursing he didn't have his capture weapon in order to stop the blonde. Bakugo instantly took Izuku into his arms as Izuku did the same in a fierce and gentle hug. Grips were tight enough where clothes would most likely wrinkle. Neither one of them were going to let go and let each other out of their sight. Bakugo certainly wasn't going to now that Izuku was right where he was supposed to be. Everything he had done up to that point was worth it. You damn nerd, Bakugo said as he willed himself not to start crying. He had disobeyed Aizawa's orders and followed not long after claiming he was going to the bathroom and didn't need fucking babysat like a toddler. He didn't care if he got in trouble. He needed to know. He needed to see for himself that Izuku was right there and alive. He stopped before the window as he heard a new yet so familiar voice speaking. Izuku did have a quirk, and apparently it wasn't one to be taken lightly. The bastard who took him all those years ago was indeed his deadbeat father who Bakugo wasn't even sure existed, but suspected. Izuku finally sounded like he officially grieved for his mom, who loved him more than her life itself. Hearing that he was going to be okay, Bakugo knew he needed to finally see for himself, but wasn't prepared for the flood of it all when his eyes met with green ones. Kaken. Izuku sobbed in happiness as he clambered to him. Yeah, it's okay. I'm here now. Why you're in not mad? Izuku stuttered as he sniffled and tried catching his breath. No, you nerd. You're exactly where you are supposed to be. Izuku let out a wail as he sobbed again as Bakugo put his forehead to Izuku's shoulder. Izuku didn't need words now. Knowing that Bakugo, Katsuki, Kaken was there and wanted him around was more than he could have wanted. Upon learning that he was alive, he wondered about his friend. Was he angry that some quirkless loser saved him? Did the event that happened in the apartment hurt him in ways he wouldn't become the amazing hero he knew he'd become? Izuku was so glad to see a face he knew, and this apparently was real and was going to stay. Bakugo liked and hated the way Izuku felt in arms. He had finally come to accept the nerd was home safe with him again, but he felt wrong. He was bony, and it was obvious the people who held him hadn't been taking care of him. No matter, he'd whipped this nerd into shape, whether it be cooking or later on working out together. He heard what Aizawa said. Izuku still needed saving. He might not have actually rescued him, but he was going to make Izuku stay that way. I thought I told you to stay put. Aizawa scolded as the two separated. Please don't be mad, Eraserhead. Izuku panicked as he clung to his friend's arm. Apparently Kaken did as Kaken does, and that was doing what he wanted, ignoring what he's told otherwise. Izuku was glad that hadn't changed about his friend. Aizawa let out a loud sigh. Fine. This time Bakugo. Next you won't be getting off so lucky. Did the other two follow you? He hoped not. It wasn't like he didn't want them to meet Izuku, but one was loud, and the other could open old wounds that shouldn't be touched yet. Despite not being related, they both seemed to skip over the meaning of being subtle. No. Good. I think that's enough for today for stimulation. Izuku's probably tired, and it'd be best for him to get some rest before being discharged. Mike can drive you home. Don't worry, you'll see Bakugo again. Aizawa reassured Izuku, who had a hint of fear in his eyes. Bakugo reluctantly left, but mumbled something under his breath that Aizawa didn't hear. The pro was dead on when he said Izuku was tired, because less than 5 minutes later the kid was zonked, dead to the world. Aizawa smiled at the sight of Izuku finally resting as peacefully as he could get with everything that happened today. He was surprised the kid hadn't passed out earlier and stayed that way for days. Such tenacity that he saw in his students. Aizawa went to follow Bakugo to make sure he left when Izuku's whimpered. Turning around and gently clasping his hand, the boy settled down. That was fine. He'd stay here with him and not leave his side. He'd just send a couple quick messages asking for favors long overdue. Recovery Girl kept him overnight, thinking it best to keep an eye on him and let him rest. She also wanted to get him started on his meal plan to see how he'd react to eating. Starting small and with liquids was the best option, as anything filling made him sick. The kid only woke up once due to a nightmare, and although Aizawa gave him the option, Izuku refused to talk about it. Kept on saying it wasn't his burden to bear and not to waste his time. For the time being, Aizawa let it go, and after fighting sleep for hours, Izuku passed out again, only waking at breakfast the next morning. At least someone got to sleep. Aizawa was pretty sure he had a crick in his neck and back. The old lady also thought she was sneaky too and healed him. Whatever. At least he'd be at 100% to take care of Izuku. Aizawa was going over his recovery plan with Recovery Girl as Izuku got dressed in the clothes Hisashi brought by the next morning. They were Hitoshi's, and the boy said he could have them as it was the least he could do for now. The boy also expressed that whenever Izuku was willing, he wanted to be first in line to see him. Aizawa said sure, but don't expect anything soon. Bakugo was purely an act of disobedience that ended up working out. Hisashi, your apartment is all set up. I told you when you got a kid I'd be there 110%. Aizawa, whatever. Not my kid. Just looking out for him until he's safe. Are you ready to go? Aizawa asked, coming back into the room. He gave an amused look as Izuku wrapped his capture weapon around his arms before slipping on a gray hoodie. That was an excellent spot. To anyone else, they looked like bandages, and if it made Izuku calmer, then it was worth the sacrifice. Yeah, Izuku said before turning to Recovery Girl and bowing. Thank you. Enough of that. Just get better, dear, and we'll do a checkup in a week and see where you're faring. Recovery Girl said. All right, kid, let's go. Izuku was quiet on the ride to Aizawa's apartment. As much as Izuku wanted to jump out the car, he knew he wouldn't get far before Aizawa would grab him. This was all so much, and he wasn't worth the time and energy spent helping him. What if this just turned out like before? His father could come back, murder Aizawa, and slaughter everyone that lived there. He'd be responsible for so many more lives taken. That was what they said. Because of him, those people died. He wasn't smart enough. He wasn't. So, I figured we'd just make a lazy day today, then tomorrow try and pick up some things you'll need. Aizawa said. Like what? Izuku asked. Well, you'll need your own toiletries. You can use mine for sure, but they won't last long. Also, I'll need groceries for your meal plan and just a few other things. Aizawa explained. Don't worry. You'll be fine. If you'd like, I can have someone else go with us. Kaken? Izuku asked with a little bit of hope in his voice. If he must. Aizawa rolled his eyes. But I was thinking of another pro who has more of an aptitude for shopping. Oh, well, I guess so. Izuku said, unsure. You know Present Mike? Of course. Izuku nodded. I listened to his radio station all the time when I was little. I can invite him. He's better at this and has done this before. Aizawa said. Izuku nodded. Present Mike was okay. He remembered listening to the radio and hearing about the voice hero complain about his grumpy cat friend. Looking at Aizawa, that must be him. It was cool that they knew each other. Izuku trusted Aizawa, so he'd trust him when introducing new people. Izuku sat on the couch as Aizawa made some tea. Right now, he just wanted to de-stress, and then probably take a nap, which Aizawa wholeheartedly agreed with. Afterward, Aizawa said if he wanted, he could look into things he might need or want. Izuku fretted over Aizawa spending money on him. He didn't need to use his hard-earned paychecks to cater to him. He'd be fine until he moved on. Izuku had accepted for the moment he wasn't going anywhere with Aizawa's watchful eye. Maybe he could try, but if anything like that night happened again, Izuku knew that it would probably end the same. If the man was spared then, A harsh knock came at the door, and Izuku panicked, gripping the sides of the couch cushions. He never used doors, and Aizawa mentioned they'd order something later, so he wasn't expecting anyone. Watching intently, Izuku saw him call his spare capture weapon, just in case. Izuku was grateful when the hero said he could keep the one he had gotten literally attached to. Izuku did agree that it needed some TLC to get some of the dried blood out of it. Aizawa peered out the peephole before sighing. "How the hell do you know where I live?" Aizawa deadpanned as he opened the door and looked at the blonde who was smirking. "Present Mike was a moron for taking care of your shit before taking me home," Bakugu said as he invited himself in and barged through. Aizawa noted he had both a duffel bag and backpack with him. "Oh no, I'm not letting that nerd out of my sight. You're not staying here. Watch me, hobo." Aizawa rolled his eyes as the blonde pushed right by him and sat next to Izuku on the couch. That sounded pretty on brand for him. He guessed he got his answer to his question and took it too much to heart. If he wasn't the one to save Izuku, then he was going to be there every step afterward and make sure Aizawa took care of Izuku. This kid was going to be up his ass like a Pomeranian or Chihuahua. This was why he liked cats. Izuku's cry of joy brought him back, and he entered the living room to see him sobbing happy tears at the notebooks currently in his hands and a couple of figurines of the #1 hero. "K Kaken T, thank you," Izuku blubbered out as he hugged the blonde, sporting a smile. The first real one he had seen since meeting the kid. It was precious, and Aizawa knew he made the right choice. Even if it was Bakugu, the blonde was crucial in Izuku's recovery and finally getting him to open up to start healing. Izuku fully trusted Bakugu, and although Izuku had trust in him, he could see it wavered with uncertainty. "Yeah, I kept them for you because I remembered they were important to you and you'd want them back, right?" Izuku nodded furiously. Regardless of everything, these notebooks were life's work, and because of his own quirk, he wanted to see how close he was to figuring out some of their quirks. Maybe he'd be able to help Kaken. He did make it into the UA hero course after all, like he knew and said he would. "Well, I don't have #10. Ibags there has it." "But why?" "They're impressive notes, Izuku. You shouldn't take that for granted. That level of skill is useful in whatever you decide to do." Aizawa commented, and Izuku looked like he wanted to disagree, but didn't. Eraserhead?" Izuku asked nervously. "Just call me Shota or Aizawa." "Oh, okay, Mr. Aizawa." Aizawa held back the sigh. Well, it was better than his hero name. "What's going to happen now that I'm here?" Aizawa kneeled down in front of him and put a hand on his knee. He gave the boy a reassuring smile. "I promise you'd stay with me for the time being so I can look after and protect you. UA is on a small break, so that'll give us some time so you can properly settle in and get on a schedule. Depending how you feel after that determines the next step. We're going at your pace, Izuku. If you're up to it, we'd like to get started in mainstream recovery, such as counseling and maybe even socializing. We can always start small and work our way up." What does work our way up mean?" Izuku asked nervously. "Well, I have an empty seat in my class, and I'd like you to fill it for the time being. You can get an education, and that way I can keep an eye on you. The kids I teach aren't bad, just a little wild, and it'll be a good way to socialize with people your own age. UA is one of the safest places you can be, and we promise to protect you." "Fuck yes," Bakuga said. Aizawa rolled his eyes, but hearing the small giggle from Izuku was worth it. Chapter 8. Aizawa thought it would be peaceful when he woke up, but no. Not when Bakugu was slamming the door open to his bedroom at 8 in the fucking morning. If the doorknob left a dent in his wall, he was going to be pissed, and Bakugu was going to learn how to fix his wall. "What the hell, Teach? Your entire place is empty as shit," Bakugu yelled. "Why are you up?" Aizawa groaned as he ungracefully rolled out of bed to glare at his student. "I don't sleep all day, unlike your lazy ass. Plus, if you're going to keep to your schedule that both you and Izuku need, then breakfast is needed so we can get started," Bakugu yelled before walking back out to the living room. "Can't cook if you don't have shit to make." Aizawa just rolled his eyes before grabbing his phone. Hisashi would arrive in like an hour, and he still had to make a couple phone calls to Nizu, Recovery Girl, and then possibly Hound Dog in that order. The call to the principal was simply to update him on everything and his health. Nizu sounded giddy to learn Izuku was in his care and said he impatiently waited for when he could finally meet the child. "Yeah, never," if Aizawa had to say. Recovery Girl was next as she wanted an update on how his first night out of the hospital went. The night went well, from how Aizawa observed it. They had simply takeout from a healthier restaurant that allowed him to stick to the meal plan, and as far as he knew, Izuku didn't wake up. But he was also willing to bet that Bakugo took care of that. He was going to ask the boy later. Talking to Izuku didn't seem wise, and Aizawa didn't think he would actually tell him. Recovery Girl seemed pleased with his progress and said to introduce the idea of talking to Hound Dog. From there, they discuss if Izuku needed any medications. He needed to let Izuku see talking about it in a safe place with someone who could provide the tools he needed to live his life. That was the issue. Izuku didn't want to live his life, trapped in an endless loop of what-ifs and scared out of him of something happening to the people who were trying to help him. Aizawa saw it at the hospital and saw it yesterday while they were driving home. Izuku looked like he wanted to bolt, and Aizawa won't admit it, but he was grateful Bakugo was here because he made Izuku stay. "Where's Izuku?" Aizawa asked, finally emerging from his room dressed in what Bakugo could say might be his hero costume. Does this man own other clothes besides those atrocious pink sweatpants he wore last night? In the shower. Told the nerd to take one. No argument, Aizawa asked. He certainly didn't hear one, and with Bakugo, he would have heard it. Nope, Bakugo said, popping the P as he scrolled through the phone. How? Aizawa asked. He was sure that if he had asked if Izuku wanted to do anything, he would have said no. You just don't have the power I have. Bakugo snorted with a smirk. Bakugo. Fine, just make him do it because you want it. That nerd right now doesn't want anything. But if I tell him to clean up because I'm not going to be seen with his raggedy ass in public, he's certainly taking his happy ass right in there because it's gonna make fucking pleased. Yeah, that made sense actually. Izuku helped him get out because it benefited Aizawa, and he took the kid along for the ride, unable to just leave him there. All the choices Izuku made were because someone else asked. A little people pleaser, and Aizawa was dead serious in telling him last night he wanted him in his class. Izuku belonged in that empty seat in his class regardless of his past or not. The kid was a hero, but just lost sight of being that person when one sees what being a hero can lead to. As far as he knows, Izuku thinks everyone he's tried to help has died and hadn't realized that isn't the case. That won't always work, Aizawa said. Well, it's what fucking works right now, so tough shit. You know you can't baby him, Aizawa responded. Bakugo wasn't always going to be there to hold Izuku's hand. He agreed to take in one child, not two, and Bakugo still had parents who would like him home and cared about him. Aizawa admitted that having the blonde around would be beneficial to Izuku's recovery. There was no denying it, but if Izuku leaned too much on him, it might cause an issue. He'd be codependent, and Bakugo would only enable it. Are we still going out? Izuku asked, a little nervous as he came back in. A towel wrapped around his shoulders, and he wore what he had yesterday. Yes, they were definitely going shopping today. This kid needed clothes. Yes, you definitely need clothes, and by the looks of it, a haircut, Aizawa said, motioning to the mop of unruly, messy curls that were all over the place. It's in your eyes, Izuku. You'll let someone do it, or I'm giving you a buzz cut. No Kakin, Izuku whined before he looked down. But what it? Aizawa kneeled in front of him. Izuku, no one is going to get you. They don't where you are unless they have a tracker on you, which they don't. We checked. You need things like clothes. I know it's scary, but Aizawa couldn't believe he was taking the advice from a child. We want you to be comfortable and start healing. Izuku looked at Aizawa, then at Bakugo. His eyes dart between them, rapidly thinking that Kakin will come to his rescue and say it's too early to be doing this kind of stuff. Kakin is a traitor. The blonde only narrowed his, shook his head, and smirked. He wasn't going to get out of this. At 9 o'clock sharp, a knock was at the door. Luckily, having told Izuku prior calmed any reaction, and he curiously looked as Aizawa opened the door to a blonde man in glasses wearing a man-bun. Izuku's eyes brightened a bit knowing who this was and finally being able to meet another hero he logged in his notes. He wanted to talk to Recovery Girl too. They were heroes just taking time out of their busy schedules to help someone like him. Hey, you little listener. You probs know me as Present Mike, but you can call me Hizashi unless we're at school, you dig. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. As much as he thought his friend was a blonde idiot, Hizashi wasn't dumb. He didn't give an option to call him something else, and just use his given name. This would allow Izuku to see that interpersonal relationships were okay and help the kid open up to him, showing his trust. "Oh, okay," Izuku said nervously. He was just like he sounded back on his radio show. "And nice to meet you. Coolio. Now let's get going. We've got a lot to get through," Hisashi said. "Thanks again, Hisashi," Aizawa said to him as the boys went out first. "No problem, man. I told you I'd be there for whatever you needed, and if that's helping do a little shop till we drop, to make the little listener feel safer, then I'm your guy. Hitoshi is going through his stuff to see what he doesn't want or need anymore, and we'll drop it by while we're gone. I could tell he wanted to come too, but unlike someone else, he knows how to listen," Hisashi said as he looked toward Bakugo, who only turned around to glare at the pro, resisting the urge to flick him off. Aizawa nodded in agreement. He asked Hisashi to come alone, but glad to know he wasn't the only one who thought it best. Hitoshi would get his chance to talk to Izuku one day. If Izuku agreed to join the class, then they would see each other. Izuku would meet a lot of new people who Aizawa just knew would all be eager to be his friend and help him out. They went to a nearby mall that had all they needed, or at least in the surrounding area. Around the area held shops that had clothes, hairdressers, furniture, groceries, everything they needed. Izuku held tightly onto Bakugo's sleeve as they walked. It was so nerve-wracking with all these people around. Izuku jumped in surprise as Bakugo was pulled away from him. "Come on, listener, we can split it up and get done faster," Hisashi said. "What?" Bakugo said as Hisashi started to pull him away. Bakugo tried to fight him off, but then Hisashi leaned over and whispered something in his ear that made him calm down. Bakugo gave a deadpan look before giving Izuku a nod that it's be okay. Izuku assumingly watched as the two blondes, while one dragged off toward the part of the convenience store area where they would find the groceries needed to stock Aizawa's apartment. Izuku could well the anxiety welling up. Kaken was gone. It wasn't that he didn't trust Aizawa, but what if something happened again? He just got him back in his life. "Don't worry, you'll still be able to hang out with him. They'll be fine. We're getting you a haircut, and it's better than them sitting around. I'm sure you know Bakugo would go stir crazy or try to control everything," Aizawa said as he pointed to the hair salon they were next to. Oh, that made sense. Kaken would have been terrible sitting still and would have drove everyone crazy trying to tell them what to do. Izuku could see him trying to grab the clippers. Eventually, Hisashi let go of Bakugo, who reluctantly followed along. Bakugo didn't want to let Izuku out of his sight. Yes, he would be with Aizawa, who was competent enough to watch over him, but he just got him back. However, Loudmouth had a point when he told him Aizawa and Izuku needed time to get used to each other. Yes, they were going to be living together, and although Izuku trusted Aizawa, there was a difference. Izuku needed to learn to talk to Aizawa not related to hero work or his case. They needed to bond and form a deeper level of trust than savior and victim. "Let's just get this over with so we can get back. And don't put anything in there we don't need," Bakugo yelled at him. "It pleases me to see you happy, listener. You've certainly changed a bit since school started." "No fucking shit, and I ain't fucking happy," Bakugo said as he put high-quality broths in the cart that are said to be full of proteins. If it was on his teacher's wallets, then he wasn't settling for anything less than the best. Izuku needed to put weight as the little nerd looking like a twig. "That little listener seems to have you wrapped around his finger," Hisashi teased. "Shut the fuck up," Bakugo said, popping his hand before turning so he didn't have to look at the stupid grin plastered to his English teacher's face. He was not giving that man the satisfaction of seeing his red, flushed face. He was just pleased that now people would stop thinking he was bat's hit about Izuku's kidnapping. Izuku was finally safe and where he belonged, next to him, like he should have always been. Izuku felt like a weight lifted off his head when they walked out about an hour and a half later. Literally, the nice lady had trimmed his curls so now they were manageable, but still remained the fluffiness he remembered as a child. She was super nice and didn't do anything he wasn't comfortable with. She always asked him questions about what he liked, and with reassuring nods from Aizawa, Izuku found himself able to answer her, although in a quiet voice. He even got to hear about her quirk. It was kind of embarrassing though, as the lady also fawned over him, calling him adorable and loving his natural curls. She also gave him hair products perfect for his hair while trying to coax Aizawa to do the same for long hair care. The man sarcastically said, "Yeah, right," while paying. "Looks good, kid. Probably feels better. Aizawa asked as they walked. Yes, thank you. Izuku nodded. No problem. I figured we'd go someplace to get it done, because I don't trust either me or Hizashi with scissors. Is that why you both have long hair? Izuku said. Both Hizashi and Aizawa had long hair, and Izuku couldn't imagine the lengths to go through to take care of it. He just didn't see the point of keeping it long as a hero unless one had to. It'd just get in the way or be used against them. So there is a sassy child in there. No, I didn't mean it like that. Izuku said frantically. I'm sorry. Aizawa gave a slight snort as he opened the doors to the main area of the mall, which directed them to the shops. He gave him a slight pat on the shoulder. You're fine. You can make jokes like a kid should. Come on, we've still got places to go. Here you'll find a bunch of clothes and decor. Pick anything you like. It's fine. I don't need much. Izuku said as he barely looked at the stores. Don't waste your money. You might need it for something important. You already gave me a room. Izuku, you are important. Money isn't a problem. I have a job as a teacher and as a pro hero. The school gave a little allowance to help you too. I literally don't spend it on anything. Please let me give you some belongings. You can't just use the same clothes all the time, and I want the apartment to feel like your home too, for however long. Aizawa explained. He's pretty sure the school allowance came out of Nizu's personal funds, but he wasn't going to mention to anyone. Will I eventually have to leave? Izuku asked. That's up to you. Aizawa said. He wasn't going to tell the kid he wouldn't mind if he stayed. From what he knows, heard, and seen about Izuku, he's a good kid who has been dealt a bad hand in life. The problem was he wasn't able to fold and get a new one until the game was finished. He had to stick it out. Izuku looked down at the ground and mumbled something Aizawa couldn't quite hear. You need to speak up, Izuku. Aizawa encouraged him. Giving him a small nudge to speak up hopefully will turn into confidence to do it without being prompted. It was important for him to learn, even if he didn't want to be a hero, that his voice was one of the most powerful tools a person can use. I don't know what I like. That statement broke Aizawa's heart. Most of what he liked had been when he was a child of 10, not a teenager of 15. He most likely didn't remember anything from those years ago. All Might was a staple through generations, so that was a given, and sadly enough, that was it. In addition, he didn't know anything about the new world he was dropped into. 6 years didn't seem long to others, but to Izuku, it was a lifetime. His lifetime. The ages he was held captive were when children were developing their emotions, thoughts, ideas. It was truly when they started to grow up. That's okay. We can check out something and see what you think. Nothing bad about trying new things. Aizawa said as he grabbed a cart. Izuku nodded and wordlessly followed. Aizawa took note of what Izuku's eyes would linger on the longest. Any spark of interest would lead Aizawa to silently place it in the cart. Izuku noticed a couple times, but of course didn't say anything. If he didn't like it, he could always return it or donate it. If he never tried anything, then he'd never learn. Do you want some new notebooks? Aizawa asked while they were about to pass the stationery section. Can I? Izuku asked and his eyes brightened. Yeah, you're going to need them. There are plenty of new heroes and students to analyze. You seem to be interested in those. Okay. Aizawa couldn't help smiling at that. Now that Izuku looked more like a child instead of an undergroomed ragamuffin, he could see the expressiveness of his eyes. Big green eyes that shined like little emeralds. Slowly but surely that sparkle was returning, and the blank look was becoming more colorful. For now, baby steps. They waited patiently for Yamada and Bakugu to return. Izuku looked at all the bags around him. He noticed that there were things in the bags he didn't pick out. Aizawa asked his opinion on clothes, so he had various shorts, a few pairs of jeans, normal t-shirts, and a few fancier clothes. Aizawa said it would be logical to be prepared for anything. He also had new notebooks and pens that looked like his old ones. He couldn't wait to add to them. Alongside the notebooks, he noticed a few other things he didn't pick out. There were some posters and books. From he saw the posters had various heroes on them, and the books varied in fiction to what others would find boring, Quirk theory. However, Aizawa said he had to use the restroom. While Izuku panicked for a moment, Aizawa assured him that there was too many people here for anyone to try anything, and that had be gone 5 minutes. If anything happened, scream. For minutes went by and Aizawa returned with a bag Izuku didn't recognize. He certainly didn't have when he left as he sat next to him, taunting him to look inside. If it was for himself, he didn't want to intrude, but it looked like it was from a tech store he had seen on the way in. Go on, Aizawa encouraged him. Izuku nervously looked inside and saw a cell phone, a game system he hadn't seen before, and a laptop. What? Izuku gasped. This was too clearly weren't for Aizawa. He had seen the man use a cell phone that didn't need repairs. He didn't look like someone who would play video games, and he used a working laptop yesterday as they browsed online. Everything was solid black, but Izuku could see some vouchers perhaps for casing and an online shop. These were for him. It didn't take being a rocket scientist to know these items were expensive. He must have spent over $1,000 just on him today. No, you don't have to do this, Izuku said as he pushed the bag away. Aizawa knew getting Izuku to accept anything was going to be difficult. He sort of took a page out of Bakugu's book and went ahead and did it without consent. He bought them yesterday after Izuku had gone to bed and set them to be picked up. These were items the boy needed and would probably like to use to de-stress after long days or to help acclimate. However, he knew Izuku would lock up if they entered the store, so he'd just handle the after. Izuku, it's okay. Who bought these? You. Whose money was used? Yours. Aizawa noted how his breath picked up a moment in panic. Who went into the store? Alone, might I add. You. So whose decision was it? Yours. Did you make me buy these? I don't know. Did you ask me to? No. Do you have a quirk that has the power of persuasion? No. Did you make me buy these? No. Then we can conclude this wasn't your fault, and I did this because I wanted to. It's okay to feel the way you do, but it isn't good to bottle it up. You can talk to me, and I promise to listen, but you're going to need these. The phone is so you can start having a life back when you're ready. You can talk to Bakugu when he's not around. I'm not going to, or let you stay cooped up in the house. I thought the gaming system might be nice to feel a little more your age. The laptop is for when you start school again, so we can get you caught up in case there's a lot you don't know, or you can watch things. Okay. Okay. Izuku nodded as he wiped his face of tears. Let's go already. Bakugu's voice yelled as he came up holding back, while Hisashi trailed behind carrying a lot more. The drive home was quiet. Hisashi chatted about all the different meals that could be made, and Aizawa made sure the man picked up some jelly pouches as long as he promised not to give Izuku any. Aizawa made no promises, and the kid could have some if he wanted. Bakugu would resort, then they better not stray from his diet plan. Izuku felt a comfort listening to them talk as he laid his head against the window. He couldn't believe it. If something had told him a month ago that he'd escape his father's clutches, that Kaken was alive, and there was finally some normalcy in his life, he wouldn't have believed it. Yes, the League and his father were probably going to chase after him, but this time he wasn't a weak 10-year-old boy. He had his quirk, and looking at the reflection in the window, he had all these people too. Izuku shook his head on the window. He didn't want to involve them in his problems, but they kept pushing themselves in without concern for their own lives. His didn't matter as much as theirs. Let's go? We don't have all day and night. Bakugu yelled as they pulled up and were getting everything out. He refused to not take it all up in one trip, loading each of his teachers heavily while keeping Izuku light. I can take more Kaken. It is all for me anyway, Izuku said. No, go, Bakugu said, pointing to the door where Aizawa was waiting. Fine, Izuku said, sighing as he realized he wasn't winning this one. Did you have fun today, kid? Aizawa asked when they walked in and found themselves alone. Yeah, actually, Izuku said, grasping the bags tighter, although a small smile graced his face. Good. I'm glad. Izuku, you might not want to, but I'd like for you to have a couple sessions with Hound Dog, UA's school counselor. Is that okay? Aizawa asked. I guess so. Izuku agreed. Hurry up, you slowpokes. Hisashi yelled from the top of the steps. Aizawa rolled his eyes before motioning for Izuku to lead the way. All right, let's get these in. Hitoshi is expecting me home soon. Who's that? Izuku asked. My kiddo, Hisashi said. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll meet later. Izuku didn't know Present Mike had any children. This must be a recent development or one the hero kept quiet about whenever he talked on the radio. Certainly understandable because they could use him against the hero. Regardless, the kid had to be old enough for Hisashi to trust him to drop things off or be out by himself. maybe a little older or younger than him. Unlocking the door, Aizawa stopped as he came face to face with someone who wasn't supposed to be here right now. Hitoshi's eyes said it all as crap. It looked like he was about to leave, but there was going to be no avoiding it. That's Ibags Jr. Bakuga deadpanned. Izuku looked at the boy in front of him. He seemed so familiar to him. Izuku mainly interacted with adults, unless the man-child Tamura counted. The doctor was smart as he was devious, only going off people no one would think twice about missing or under the guise of help with unfortunate accidents easily swept under the rug. Looking in the boy's purple eyes, he had seen them before. They looked different, older, stronger, but those of someone filled with admiration and gratefulness and not full of fear. Izuku had finally escaped. He hadn't tried for a while, wanting them to fall into a false sense of security that he'd finally given up. It had worked too, as the doctor took him out without the leash, which was just a shock collar he used whenever he got out of line. He heard rumors of a healing quirk that could help his father after he got seriously injured about less than a year after his capture. Izuku admittedly said he didn't care, but that only brought more trouble. Izuku never got to see the quirk though. Izuku had it all planned out for the most part, and it had worked. Izuku attacked the doctor using Kaken's quirk and made a run for it. The doctor screamed at him to get back, or else. However, as Izuku neared freedom, he heard it. "Let me go." Izuku didn't hear what the doctor said, but he remembered the look on the boy's face. He was frightened, and Izuku knew the man who had his grubby, old hands clasped around his wrist wouldn't help him. Not in the way the boy would hope. He looked like he was someone needing help, and Izuku knew he couldn't let him do what he did to all those other people. "Stop it!" Izuku shouted, darting out, exploding the man's arm. His explosions weren't very strong because he wasn't allowed to work his quirk, but enough to make him falter and release the boy. He didn't expect to be backhanded and sent hurtling toward the ground, where the doctor stepped on him, keeping him place. "Run, go to." Izuku remembered that day. He yelled the first address that came to mind where he knew the boy could possibly get some help. He remembered Present Mike saying people could send fan mail, or if people inquired about advice, to his radio station. Izuku planned to do so, but yeah, being kidnapped happened. The boy in front of him was an older, splitting image of the boy he saved. Wild purple hair and eyes that looked tired. "I remember you," Izuku said softly. "What?" everyone said. Izuku nodded. "I remember that day. You got out after all. The doctor said because of what I did, he sent someone out to kill you, and that it was all my fault." Hitoshi sucked in a breath before taking initiative. Midoriya. Izuku thought he died because he tried to save him, and from what Hisashi and Bakugo told him the day before, he thought everyone he's ever tried to save died. The people at the apartment complex. Bakugo. And now him. "Nope," Hitoshi said with a lazy grin. "Sent me right to his radio station, and well, the rest is history. You saved me. He saved me. I wouldn't be here without you, and I've wanted to talk to you for so long. The past 4 years I've had one thing on my mind besides being a hero who I could stand up and be proud of myself for saving someone else too. I'm getting there now because you saved my life. Izuku, my name is Shinso Hitoshi, and I want to say thank you for saving me." Izuku's eyes quickly rose to meet Hitoshi's that were locked with his. Izuku could see that boy who needed saving underneath this new boy that was appreciative and kept living. This boy wanted to be a hero because Izuku was one for him that day. He couldn't be one. He, maybe, possibly wanted that dream. Instead of letting his thoughts run rampant, he did what Midoriya's did best, cried. He was happy the boy, Shinso Hitoshi, was alive and living a life. A life he just confirmed Izuku gave him. "Well, now that this sappy chick flick moment is over, let's put this shit away so we make something. Izuku, go sit down, and the rest of you lazy bastards come help." Bakugo yelled. Izuku snorted. He wasn't about to tell Kaken that they had a chick flick moment the other day in the hospital. The blonde would probably explode hearing that. The shared look between Hitoshi and Hisashi said it all, as they both frowned and sort of pouted before reluctantly following the orders of a 16-year-old. Aizawa stuck around for a moment. "Izuku, you may not want this new life you've been given, but everyone here won't give up on you and let this new start go to waste," Aizawa said simply before leaving to help. "Let's get this party started, yo." Yamada's voice echoed out the kitchen. Izuku stood there in the middle of the living room, watching as all 3 people who had come in his life busied themselves. Shinso and Aizawa had been banished to putting away the groceries while Bakugu took to cooking and delegated Yamada as his helper and could sit quietly to chop vegetables. It was all so domestic. He remembered the last time he witnessed such a familiar and comforting sight as he saw his mom prepare his birthday dinner, his favorite, katsudon. She worked hard all day, making sure every day was perfect for him. He wanted that. All right, Mighty Man dinner's almost ready, and our guest should be here soon. All right, Izuku. Yeah, Mom. Remember, whatever happens in life, I love you just how you are. You're my strong boy and will always make me smile if you just be yourself and keep going forward with a smile. Remember, just like All Might. Can I see my cake now? No, silly. Go get the door. Izuku wasn't blind as he and his mom thought each of them thought. He knew she knew he was having trouble with school and didn't have any friends because he was supposedly quirkless. However, she always made it seem like he was special and the most important thing to her. He would miss his mom so much, but the life he knew and cherished with her died that night too. It was time for something new. Although he still adored All Might, these were his new heroes and a new life. He just needed to start learning how to live. Aizawa made him get out of there even if he had accepted he was there until he just wasted away. Kaken made him do things that, although made him uncomfortable, actually helped him along with next leaving his side. Present Mike. Yamada was just a sunshine to be around and made everything not so dark. Even though he just met Shinso, the boy was living proof he had done something right, and the purple-haired teen swore he wasn't leaving him either. Izuku? Aizawa asked, seeing the boy just staring off into space and crying. I want to get be better. Izuku cried. I want to hang out with Kaken without needing to worry if I'm safe. I want to go to school with you. Izuku cried over and over, and all Aizawa could do was take him into his arms for a hug. I want that too. He whispered into his hair. Chapter 9. Izuku was so nervous as he fiddled with his tie in his hands. Maybe he should just ask Mr. Aizawa if he knew how to do it, or he was 100% all for not wearing it at all. He'd much rather prefer the latter option, but that would just burden him. Also, to tell him he'd rather not wear the tie because it reminded him of something the doctor put on him when he didn't behave wouldn't go over well either. Izuku didn't want to think about it and shook his head of the thought. He was actually kind of excited to go to school again, especially with Kaken, at UA nonetheless. If he told him, Aizawa might keep him back until Izuku talked about it. He'd rather not yet. Thanks. However, if he didn't put on the tie, he could make Aizawa mad and would be disgracing UA, the school he once dreamed about attending that was graciously providing for him. He didn't understand why they were being so generous. Granted, he was only there as a cover until they could see about him being officially admitted if possible. That would be like a dream come true, but something still nagged at him. From what Mr. Aizawa said, he'd sit with his class during their normal lessons, and while they did hero training, he'd either be in his counseling sessions or seeing Recovery Girl. Once he put on a little more weight, they'd talk about exercising with them as he could gain his strength. Afterward, it would be up to Izuku, and didn't that not sit well with him? Taking a deep, calming breath, Izuku knew he couldn't bother any more than he already had, and slipped the offending material around his neck. A shiver surged down his spine. He felt his heart starting to pick, and his hand shook as he reached up to touch the soft cloth and not the humming, heavy metal. It's fine. That's me. It's just a tie. It's not going to hurt me. Izuku repeated to himself, tying it so it wasn't completely touching him and loose. He felt calm that it was over and done with. Looking in the mirror helped as he saw it was just the tie despite the way it didn't look the way he had seen them before. Hopefully no one would say anything about his tie being so short. Izuku, are you ready? Aizawa said, poking his head in the door after a small knock. Aizawa smiled. It had been a couple days since Izuku came to live with him. After Bakugu, Hizashi, and Hitoshi, reluctantly, had gone home for the night, he took everything to Izuku's room where they used the time to explore all Aizawa had gotten him. Aizawa enjoyed watching Izuku's eyes light up with little sparks of hope. This room will be yours for as long as you want it. The boy cried again when Aizawa told him that and showed him everything he got him in detail. Just as Izuku thought, Mr. Aizawa had slipped various posters and a couple figurines past him which he helped put up. There were some of All Might, Present Mike, Ed Shot, and a couple new heroes he had never heard of. He thought the one called Hawks was pretty cool. apparently was the current number 3 hero at only 22, having started his agency at 18. Aizawa said later he could use that new laptop or phone to look up all the debuts he missed. Izuku couldn't wait. His quirk looked so cool with those bright red, fierce wings. Not to mention anyone else. Aizawa got him plenty of books that fit on the small shelf that had a bunch of old textbooks. Aizawa said he was more than welcome to look through if there was something he didn't know. Izuku thanked him as he couldn't wait to see what each was about. He told Aizawa he was the minority of people who loved to learn. Aizawa joked he was already better than half his students. Izuku liked hanging out with Aizawa. The man could be funny when he wasn't trying to be. He made him feel safe and comfortable. He was just himself, and while he was cautious, he didn't treat Izuku like he was made of glass. For the time being, Izuku would use the beddings Aizawa already had. Aizawa said he forgot the simple comforts of having your own sheets, comforters, and blankets as he thought about the ones already there. Currently, they were black sheets with a navy blue plaid comforter. Izuku said he didn't mind it and liked them a lot. They settled on at least getting him a blanket or two of his own. While at the tech store, Aizawa made sure they also set up his phone to his plan, and he already had 4 numbers in his contacts. Kaken wouldn't leave until Izuku had it memorized. He drilled him until he could say 397, 567, for 667 like the back of his hand, along with the promise once his phone was set up to text him. Izuku didn't get why that was important when it would be in his contacts. Apparently, he might always have access to that. Izuku thought, mocking his friend. Izuku mentioned it'd be easier to just write it down, and Kaken protested that his dumbass would lose it. Meaning, he was glad Kaken hadn't changed too much. Yes, Izuku said as he pulled at his tie again. Aizawa watched as he put on his red high tops. Clearly something was bothering him, but he couldn't put a finger on it. Was he nervous about today? Last night the boy expressed he was excited to attend school to see what UA was like and see all the students. Aizawa took it as a good sign. Although his class was the most rambunctious group, yet they were all good kids. Also, Izuku wouldn't have too many issues following along with the curriculum. The day before, Aizawa made sure to go over everything with Izuku. Luckily, Izuku didn't need much catching up on, as his father said he refused to have a stupid son and often provided schoolwork from all different levels, expecting them to be completed correctly. Much of Izuku's alone time was spent self-studying. Izuku didn't mind that too much as he proved to be very intelligent. In some places he struggled and excelled in others, but in a few areas he was ahead for his age. Aizawa was pleased and made sure Izuku knew he could come to him if he needed help. His education level made the cover story more believable. Anyone not in Aizawa's class would be told he's a transfer student under Eraserhead. The students of 1A would be told that he was in witness protection and to leave it at that. Izuku wasn't sure if Aizawa was serious or not, but the older man said if his class couldn't handle minding their own damn business and protecting him, then he was expelling them. As future heroes, something they needed to learn: you don't have all the facts when it comes being given the duty to protect someone. At the end of the day, a hero does it because that's what they're supposed to do. However, if at any time Izuku felt overwhelmed, he could just walk out and Aizawa would handle it. Izuku reassured him that things were bright because he was excited to go to school with this new life, and he had Kaken, and now his newest friend Shinso was there too. Bakugo strolled quietly into the classroom that morning. Everyone stopped talking and looked at him. His eyes narrowed as he glared down each and every one of them. These punks probably didn't expect to see him coming back to class ever. "That's right, fuckers, I'm still here," Bakugo said with a smirk. There was no way Aizawa was getting rid of him now. Not that he was trying to be smug about it, but it was so tempting and some of that feeling might have slipped out. "Not fucking sorry." "Huh. Bakugo, watch your language. You may still be here right now, but that could easily change," Ida shouted. "Oh, shut it. You fucking wish," Bakugo said, sitting down and turning back to Shinso 2 seats behind. "Hey, eyebags. He's coming to class today." Shinso raised an eyebrow before he understood what Bakugo meant by his statement. A small smile graced his lips. He had been talking with Izuku since that night, mainly over text, but he was thankful for the opportunity to actually get to know the other boy. They shared a little more in common than they thought, and Shinso made sure he would introduce Izuku to the fine dining of cat cafes and the bliss of naps. "Good. We'll watch out for him," Shinso said. "Since when are two friends?" Shiro asked curiously. We have a mutual friend. Shinso simply answered in a monotone. No way. I don't believe it. Kaminari said laughing. Bakugo doesn't have friends. Hey, I'm his friend bro. Kirishima called. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Oh yeah, the last few days made what happened at the USJ seem like a distant memory. To be honest, that shit didn't matter anymore. Something way more important came of it, and after Bakugo laid in bed thinking about it, he technically was the reason Izuku was saved in the first place. If Aizawa hadn't jumped to save him, he would have never found Izuku. So everything else before that moment in the hospital became not important. He'll admit, he totally forgot that he'll call it an alliance with shitty hair. Bakugo wondered if he could cancel his subscription since his services were no longer required to find Izuku. However, he may still be of some use. Admittedly, the red-haired guy was a friendly fellow, and he could probably use him to help Izuku. Fine, he guessed he could stick around for a little while longer. Hey, shitty hair. Bakugo grunted. Brew, it's Kirishima. Kirishima whined before noting the seriousness to his tone. Whoa, what's up, man? Aizawa found him. Bakugo said dead serious, making direct eye contact. It took a minute before Kirishima pieced everything together. Yes, Bakugo was being vague on purpose, and yes, Kirishima wasn't the brightest red crayon in the box, but he knew with his heart what this meant. No way, Kirishima said excitedly, jumping out of his seat to go to Bakugo's. It was like a kid on Christmas, and Bakugo appreciated that he felt this way even though he'd never met Izuku. Dude, is he okay? I'm assuming he's alive. That's wicked. Aizawa is such a pro. You must be super stoked. Enough shitty hair. Bakugo yelled, pushing him away. Hey Kirishima, what's up with all of the sudden joy? Ashido asked nosily. Guys. Quiet and in your seats. Aizawa came in shouting. Quickly they scrambled into their seats and sat perfectly as their teacher walked to the podium. Mr. Aizawa, is everything okay? Ida questioned, jumping out his seat and raising his hand. We heard what happened at the USJ. I'll get to that in a minute. Sit down, Ida, Aizawa said. Ida sat back down without a word. Good morning. We have a lot to get through today. First and foremost, the UA Sports Festival is about to start. Everyone started cheering. Aizawa was beginning to rethink this whole day with Izuku if they were going to this rowdy. So not worth his headache and Izuku's mentality. Hopefully they'll be the respectful future heroes he knows they can be. Or otherwise they wouldn't be here. Quiet. Are they sure that's a good idea to hold the festival so soon after villains snuck inside? Jiro asked. Aren't they worried the villains might attack again if we're all in the same place? Ojiro added. Aizawa scoffed. The administration has decided to continue on with the UA Sports Festival to show the threat has been handled and the school is safe. They'll have increased security. As you know, this is a huge opportunity at UA that can't be skipped. This is your chance to get spotted by agencies that can assist you in one day going pro. It all starts here even as first years, so I better not see any slacking off in your training. Understand? Yes, sir. Now, Aizawa said, taking a breath. You are only being told this because it will affect your classroom setting. As you know, I was transported along with the villains when they made their escape from the USJ. As you can see, I escaped unharmed. That's because you're like a total badass, right, Mr. Aizawa? Kaminari said. No, Aizawa answered. While there, I recovered a missing boy from an incident that occurred almost 6 years ago who aided in my safe return. That boy is currently in witness protection being monitored by UA. He will be sitting in this class because we have an empty seat, so he can socialize with new people along with people he trusts and where I can keep an eye on him.